Oh yeah, I mean, look at what they did with wasn't Second Son
Infamous.
Infamous wasn't Infamous launch title.
Yeah, I think Infamous. First Son was a launch title, I believe.
And that game is still completely gorgeous.
Yeah.
So
what'll really be interesting is to see if they're actually going to do an Infamous for the new console, because it's it's kind of almost tradition at this point.
Yeah. Agreed.
Thank you. All right, I think we'll be all in frame. I'll find it when I move over there. I had to move it just a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, you look all right.
I didn't look up topics.
Nope, don't do that. Not this week.
Yeah, there's no topics.
We are just.
Like, I could type something in there.
We're just one.
2009 to 2019 or something.
It's
everything from 2010 to today.
I don't think we need to worry about it. We're just in one big section this week.
Yeah, I can just type some shit right there.
Yeah.
It's very easy. Alright, so we're not going to worry about that.
Nope.
Alright, so next is audio test. So
yeah, testing.
All right. Hey, this is my audio test. 1, 2, 3.
Testing. Hello.
I can guarantee that James is trying to way the fuck too much.
Am I low?
I can't tell. Yeah, I'm definitely up high.
I can get a little closer. Is that better?
It's still pretty low.
That looks okay.
Yeah, it still looks a little bit low.
Yeah, I might need some a little volume.
I mean, I'm getting there.
Mm-hmm.
The headphones,
as they say in France.
I'm pretty sure James cabled up the headphones. Because I don't cable them up this way. So then I can actually hear us and figure out why we're being wrong. So.
I weirdly miss having my headphones into that PS4 controller. That was weirdly comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good for if you want to play like The Last of Us or something.
Oh yeah.
It'll give you a really good experience that way.
Very true. And it's quiet. I guess it's also if you're gonna play, in a room that you can't be loud in.
Yeah.
I've just gotten so used to wearing my headphones when I'm gaming in general at this point that.
What do you press for push to talk?
I don't.
I'm not sure.
I don't use push to talk.
You use a controller,
right?
I
use a controller.
Is there a controller button?
The reason
for
why
that?
I was like, this is fucking stupid is I have to put my controller down and press a keyboard button. That's because I was like, can you turn that shit off? Because I don't fucking want it.
Yeah, but see, everyone else on Earth wants it so that we don't hear.
Yeah, it's true.
Constantly and. Constantly, it's just it's bad radio.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I'm the reason my friends call me Big Crunch because my fucking pork rinds. Literally, I'm eating.
That's why push to talk exists.
Yeah, that's the exact reason push to talk exists.
Yep. All right, so I think we're doing a little bit better.
All right, good.
How do I sound?
Yeah, I turned
correct?
you up a little bit, which is weird because you're already really fucking turned up.
You got turned up.
I got turned up.
I turned James down a little bit. That's what I was.
I turned it up in here
because he was too loud. Okay.
Thinking we're good now?
Yep.
All right, cool.
Take a look at works. Oh yes.
Apparently, this is the black hoodie episode.
Oh yeah,
just wearing black hoodie.
Well, I didn't. Who's messaging me? Is this fucking Lash? Yeah.
Just so everyone knows how cold it is outside.
Right.
To us, relatively.
To us in Texas.
Yeah, this wind is fucking no joke though.
Not a big fan.
Cold as hell.
Walked outside and I'm like, no sir, I don't like it.
Yeah, nope, not for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're good on the audio side. I'm gonna go drink. Fucking strings. Okay, stop. Wherever. Oh my god, I've got to get my eyes checked. I can't see this shit anymore. Well, it's very small text on the screen. It's not close to me.
That is true.
All right. So this is going to be like a free-form episode. It's going to be very chill. It's going to be just us. Like I said, I'm going to have the news items. I currently have them listed in the notes under the respective sections like we used to do. So I do have comics, games, entertainment.
Yeah.
And you've got your list.
Yeah.
And feel free to chime in with some of those items as we kind of go through the list. Again, we don't have to hit everything that I put on this list.
That's a decade.
What? Oh yeah.
A decade, that'd be funnier.
Yeah.
May as well make more sense.
Yeah, I didn't edit that. Yeah, I'll change it. Yeah. Okay. Go get your beer and let's do this thing.
Yep.
All right.
I know I'm gonna trip over that now that he pointed it out and I just noticed it.
Yeah, it was good that I read it now because otherwise I'd be like, okay, we're gonna do that because I don't like that sound.
Yeah.
I need to put chat up here. That's what we didn't do.
Oh yes, that would be very important.
Okay, and we're live there.
Hi, yay!
Yay, internet!
Yay, internet! Let's get our chat up so we can actually see what people are saying.
Put that there. I got an alt tab between shit without a keyboard near me, so it takes a hot fucking second.
All right, cool.
All right. We are also in. Let's see if it works. Prelude.
What's really crazy is just looking through some of the stuff over the last decade, even more so than saying like that came out this year. It's like, wow, that came out this last decade.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap.
There were a few of these games that I was like, fucking really?
Yeah. And there's stuff that I just missed outright. Like, I noticed you put Legion on the list. And I'm like, fuck, man, I forgot about Legion. Like,
yeah, I forgot about a bunch of stuff. I had to I spent a couple hours just like thinking about like, okay, what did I really like that has been gone for a while? And that one took me a bit.
Yeah. Did you just end with like any kind of dignity or self-respect within the White House?
No, that's been gone.
You're like, I missed that.
Yeah, that's definitely been gone for a long time. I don't know when it's coming back, but it'll be nice. We need a White House reboot, please.
Can we get that reboot?
Yeah.
That'd be swell.
White House remake by Capcom, please.
You know, if you switch that out, we'll all be using Star Wars koozies.
Wow.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. To celebrate Star Wars.
Yeah, we got Star Wars.
I got my fucking ticket. I'm going.
Yeah, you did.
Dude, like,
I'll switch it out.
The tickets have been since then.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like
gotta be
every
nuts.
single one is being sold out
for
days.
There we go. We're all Star Wars koozied up.
There you go. I'm probably going to go at like an off time, like early Christmas week or something like that.
Yeah.
I just lucked out. I just found like a decent seat on like, midnight.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I will go. Unless there's a companion of a handicapped person, at which point I lose my seat.
Yeah.
Which is okay, because I chose that seat.
Yes.
Yeah, you signed up for it.
Yep. All right, let's do this. This is going to be crazy. Hey, what's up,
7
man?
months.
Wow,
Nice.
thank you.
Howdy.
That's like...
That's so exciting.
The Twitch email was entirely because of fucking Brooklyn.
Probably just Brooklyn.
I swear it's just
Probably.
Brooklyn.
Yep.
Brooklyn, you're the reason we got fucking paid. Twitch paid us.
They did. Yeah,
Kinda.
we got our very first Twitch paycheck. Like, how cool is that? It was very small, but it was still a Twitch paycheck. So that's exciting. All right.
I don't know what I sent you. It just said say thank you, and I clicked the button.
Oh,
and
wow, that was weird.
Yeah.
It did a thing. That's crazy. This is going to be a crazy episode, so just feel free to like chime in whenever, because it's if you think of anything that was fun over the last decade, that's what we're probably going to talk about. Like, how did Blizzard become garbage, but Capcom's like the best thing in the world right now?
Right? What the fuck happened?
Like, how did they, like, I never would have thought that.
Jesus Christ.
I think I remember starting this show with, like back in the day with at Capcom. It'd be great if you made any games that we gave a fuck about.
Stop making Mega Man games. Well, okay.
No, we didn't want them to stop making Mega Man games. We just didn't want the knockoff that we got.
Oh yeah, that's true. And every once in a while they just release something dumb like was that Bionic Commando, the 3D one?
Hey, you know what? I liked that game.
I appreciate that you liked it.
I don't think you're allowed to be on this show anymore. Based on that one life.
I love the original.
This is like you tweeted something wrong. We're like, we gotta fire you.
Oh shit, James is canceled.
No, I love the original Bionic Commando, and I think that I let my nostalgia for the original take me into wanting to like the game more than it was actually worthy of getting.
Red Faction 2.
I've had a feel.
Red Faction 2 is the exact same thing. Like the original Red Faction was like amazing fucking game, and then like we're finally making a sequel, Red Faction, and just like this is not good.
Yeah.
I can't jump.
Yeah, exactly.
All of the Red Faction games, pretty much after one, I wanted to like, but
I just couldn't. All right, let's jump in and do this. We need to start.
It wasn't Red Faction. It was Perfect Dark. My bad.
Oh yeah, Perfect Dark that was a rough one.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, no, same goes for Red Faction. Those weren't good either, but like Perfect Dark was that like.
Everybody wanted to like Perfect Dark Zero. They all wanted to.
Yeah, but
really
it wasn't
bad.
good. It just was not good. All right, let's.
So I'm guessing
actually,
we get up at any time to get a new drink.
Yep,
or anything.
yep.
Well, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
This is almost gone.
This is a big stream of
Yeah, I
content.
decided
so
to go with your can of Bliss because that just sounds like if I switched back and forth, it might be weird.
I would just get me going, and that way I can
Yep.
knock this part out. Let's dive into the last decade of nerdy things. Adventurers, gear up for an all-new episode.
I won't do that again. Just it's still a little loud.
Okay.
Because I mean that's the thing is it's show voice, and show voice is always a little bit louder. So I'm just gonna turn you down just a little bit more.
the whole decade.
Yep. Let's dive into the last decade of nerdy things. Adventurers, gear up for an all-new episode.
That's better.
Yeah,
I just
cool.
needed. It was just like a little bit that I needed to turn you down.
Okay, cool.
Impactful for the early part of the decade. I don't fuck, dude. I didn't even.
Early part of the decade there wasn't a ton of impactful things, but definitely the latter
there
half
was.
there's been a lot of stuff.
There was
So.
a lot of stuff in here.
I just don't. I didn't look anything up. So now
just
I'm,
don't
I'm,
remember.
I'm
I've got
very
notes.
ill prepared.
That's fine.
Come on, go over there. The mouse does not like this table.
Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to the show. We are the Surly Nerd, your one-stop shop for geek news that might have flown under your radar over the last decade. I'm your host, James, and with me is our producer, Tony,
Hey.
and our co-host, Hector.
Hello.
If you're new to the show, hey, welcome. This week we'll be taking a break from all the news and breaking down tons of nerdy things that happened over the last decade. This is our last episode for the year, and I'd like to thank everybody that's been on this ride with us. We have some huge plans for next year. Don't forget that you can keep connected with us through thesurlynerd.com, where you can follow us on all social media platforms and even donate to the show. Every penny donated goes right back into the show that we make for you every week. With all that out of the way, hey, let's talk about the decade that was.
Nice.
Yep, last one for last one for the year, man.
Yeah, last one for the year. We'll be back on the 6th. And the fun spoiler about that, I will not be running that episode. I will actually be in North Carolina. So Tony and Hector are going to be running the show. So
We did this once before.
We did this before.
yeah,
It went okay.
It was a thing that happened.
Yeah. It'll go about that way.
It'll probably go about the same.
Hector,
Yeah.
what was our idea that we had for like it was getting really high and trying to discuss a movie or something?
Yeah. Okay. Special episode to start the year off.
Oh God.
Yes.
We're just gonna be like, I don't know.
Okay, so we do that, and then we like describe movie plots to each other, and the other one has to guess.
But yeah, I'll be in North Carolina.
We ourselves can't remember what the plot was,
Yep.
or it's gonna be fucking great.
Yeah, so we'll be back on the 6th, and I'll be in North Carolina for work, so I'll just be chilling up in North Carolina by myself for a few days. But yeah, they're going to be handling the show when we come back. So
Yeah, we normally take 2-3 weeks off at the end of the year.
we try to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
It's one of the few times that we take off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So. All right, let's do it.
We're not gonna get good YouTube numbers that way. If you're not consistent,
I know.
YouTube doesn't like it.
I know.
Decade roundup.
Hey, you figured something out.
I was
wondering where you were
yeah.
going to go with that.
Well done.
I was kind of confused at first. I was like, wait, what the fuck are we calling this?
Yeah, I was waiting for like you to say I didn't realize what you had tripped over, and I was like, did you forget words?
Okay, so this
are new words.
this is
I've
a
never
very
said those
kind of
words.
fast and loose show format this week. It's just one of those things that we wanted to talk about some of the crazy things that happened this decade in like nerdy stuff, but we can't obviously cover every single thing that happened. So what I did was I brought back our old show format temporarily, which is comics, games, and entertainment, and we'll kind of go over some of the headlines, some of the big hits that happened over the decade. One of the big things for comics actually over the last decade was just the comic sales improving in general. That was something that comics had been struggling for a while coming into the decade. You're talking about coming in on a post-Civil War era in Marvel. Sales started to slump because of the amount of books that were being produced. We had the movies, of course, that were taking off, but nobody was.
Yeah, at that point though, think about it. This is just a freshly kind of post the first Iron Man.
Yeah.
So this is 10 years ago. This is they've had like a couple of movies come out. Disney hadn't bought Marvel yet, and they're kind of like they're just producing their
I
films.
think Iron Man 2 was
2010. Well, yeah, I think Iron Man 2 and maybe Thor also.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is really new, and so people are like, "Holy shit, these movies are really fun. Let's go check out the comic books." And damn, did it do a lot for the comic books.
Oh, absolutely. And we got some very interesting titles out of this because it wasn't just that comics were picking up in sales because of movies, but it's because there was a lot of new IPs that came out that comic book creators were willing to take risks on. So talk about things like, just more recently, one of my favorite comics, Die, which is based on what would happen if you were teleported into a D&D world IRL.
You would die.
Yeah, Die is fantastic.
I mean, aside from you would have dice,
Yes.
you would also die because,
Yes.
you're like, I don't know how to make fire, and why are there lizard people?
Right. So that's a fantastic comic. Saga came out. Saga's considered.
Saga.
Saga is on people's list for best comic of the decade.
Yeah, no, it's mine. It's like if I had to decide like my favorite comic book of the decade, it's Saga. Saga is drawn beautifully, written beautifully. Everything about it is fucking perfect, and I don't care what anybody else has to say. It's not anybody else's comics. It's only Saga wins. Saga wins, hands down.
We had rare things like Bedlam that came out, and if you were a long time listener of the show, Bedlam's one of the first comics that we talked about. It was a comic that Tony and I picked up randomly. That was basically an Image comic that's very indie in nature. It's a very what if Batman was real kind of comic. And was kind of actually batshit insane, and it kind of mirrors that in an almost Watchmen-esque thing, but it kind of escalates it with the gore and the violence. The art's beautiful, and just a fantastic. Like that's a comic that we wouldn't have gotten before, 2010.
Yeah, no. Shit, we got more Sandman came out in the last decade.
Like how
literally
crazy
Sandman.
is that?
It's been done for years, and I loved it.
Approved by Neil Gaiman.
Written by Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
He was like done. He's like, hey, I wrote that part of that story that I never thought anybody was going to ask about, so I wrote it anyway.
Yeah.
Like holy shit, and it's amazing.
Lock and Key, also one of the first comics we talked about on this podcast, is getting a feature series on Netflix, in February, but this was a comic that I never would have pictured coming out.
Yeah, no, it's
Joe Hill as a writer was out of this decade. Like,
my entire love of all of his works entirely is the last 10 years, and holy shit, he's my favorite writer probably.
And I mean, like, it was so crazy to think about the fact that, like, if you told me 10 years ago, hey, DC Comics is going to do something called DC Black Label where it's 18 and up, and by the way, you're going to see Batman's junk.
Yep.
And I would be like, what? That'll never happen in comics. That'll never happen in comics. But it did, and it is happening. They're wrapping up the 3-issue arc of Harleen right now. We have a Wonder Woman Black Label comic that's coming out soon. They're picking up things that are non-Batman related finally. And making Black
everyone
Label
had a
comics
Black
of them.
Batman story.
But we also have what I consider two of the most prolific comic book writers in the last decade, specifically being Chip Zdarsky and Donny Cates. These two, I believe, are the future of Marvel.
Yeah.
And the direction that Marvel is going in now. Donny, because he likes to write very out there concepts. He's willing to tackle properties that people just don't normally think of as take seriously, like Guardians of the Galaxy. He did a solo Thanos run. And on paper, the concept of Cosmic Ghost Rider, if somebody handed me the concept of Cosmic Ghost Rider, I'd been like, so like a 5-year-old Marvel fan wrote this, right?
Yeah. Like so someone in the Marvel room like threw up a bunch of pages and like that's what you got out of it.
Right.
Like maybe it's the truly the dartboard idea. They literally took darts and threw it at a wall and said, well, I guess that's what we're writing.
Right. And that's what you look at.
You hit Ghost Rider and
Punisher,
and
then Silver Surfer,
Cosmic Entity,
and Thanos. This is going well so far. Last start. Wait, why is Baby on there?
Why is Baby on there? Exactly.
Who put Baby on the dartboard? You asshole.
All right, we got to work a Baby Thanos into this. How do we do it?
You know, the dartboard. The rules are the rules.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the big two like Marvel and DC. Obviously, Image Comics was very strong. You had a lot of The Walking Dead that was going on within Image that was basically keeping the company afloat for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think one of the strangest things that came out of the last decade was this resurgence of Archie comics, which is a phrase I never would have thought I would have said. Like,
when we first started doing the show, like Archie Comics as an entity, we were kind of afraid was going away because they just went off the rails. They were like, fuck it, we don't know what we're doing anymore.
Yeah.
We're just going to go crazy with Sabrina's Married to Cthulhu. We've killed Archie like 7 times.
Yep.
We don't know what the fuck we're doing anymore. There's werewolves.
Archie's going to fight the Predator at some point.
Yeah.
Like, it was again, almost a dartboard idea of just like, what crazy things can we do to the Archie universe? And it was because, and this is something that we bring up on the show a lot, when people aren't paying attention to something in the comic book industry is usually when really cool shit happens. Like Deadpool is a product of nobody giving a shit about that character.
Yep.
And somebody said, "Hey, nobody cares about this character. Can I do something with it?" And they're like, "Yeah, fuck it, do whatever."
Who cares? Yeah,
like,
do whatever you want.
He's got no lore behind him that we give a shit about. And Deadpool feels like a product of the last decade, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like he was before that, but still, like
before that we had that like that really awful like extreme Deadpool in that stupid Wolverine movie.
Yeah,
and that really felt like the aughts, the 2000 to 2010. Like everything's so edgy, everything's blah blah blah. We're really coming into ourselves and growing up as a society. And so now that we're in the 2010 to 2020, we finally got a Deadpool that was like, I know you guys just want to hear dick jokes,
right?
I'm gonna stop pretending to be emo.
We got an R-rated fucking Deadpool film that reflected what had been in the comic books for a very long time.
Yeah, it
was weird because the character of Deadpool, while he was originally written as very serious and, not fucking Slade Wilson, his change happened, just a few years after that. It's like, basically, it was just written off and then quickly turned into the Deadpool that we know. Just nobody fucking was reading his comic books, which allowed him to do the thing. It was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And then we finally get these movies now where we get R-rated versions of what had been in the comic books for years, and it's mind-blowing that this has actually been allowed to be created.
Yeah.
Like, you took something that, like, should not have been a comic book to begin with, and then turned it into something amazing, and then turned that into a film finally, and you're just like, what the fuck? Ryan Reynolds is amazing.
Yeah. And I think that you're going to hear us bring this topic up quite a bit as we kind of go through some of the news from the decade, but a big part of what happened in comics, and happened in games, and happened in entertainment was diversity. Diversity happened. You had like the Ty Niki Coates run on Black Panther. Yeah. Somebody who'd never written a comic book in his life. And his run on Black Panther is considered the definitive Black Panther.
Yep.
It is the one the movies are based off of. There was a comic book that you read this last year, Infidel.
Yeah,
which is about what it's like it's about racism. It's flat out, it's a horror
story about racism. And easily one of my favorite comics of the decade. I have a problem with my comic timeline right now because I'm reading all of them basically this year and last year.
Right.
So I don't know what came out this decade. I'd tell you if I had to pick one that I know came out this decade.
We've been giving you lots of options for the last like favorite. 30 years of comics.
Exactly.
So.
But I'd say my favorite of the decade, and I know it's probably a very JV opinion, but it's definitely The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Yeah.
I had more fun diving into that considering just like my history with the character, which was only the Melissa Joan Hart TV show, and seeing it portrayed in this way just made me completely reconsider what I had watched, you know?
And I mean, and so like I said, diversity is a big thing in comics. One of the more popular comics that came out in the last decade was actually Miss Marvel, a comic about a young Muslim girl and what she's dealing with in America.
Yep.
Written by Gail Simone, a very prolific, female author. And like, these are stories that we just wouldn't have gotten, before, in the aughts or below, because it was a boys' club. It was like a white dudes' club in comics, and now it's not a white dudes' club in comics, and it's really, really cool to see us in that kind of direction. We also had some really fun risks that were taken. Hawkeye, Matt Fraction's run of Hawkeye. Like the TV show that's about to come out is based around Matt Fraction's run of Hawkeye.
I'm still in the middle of that run right now, and it's absolutely phenomenal.
And it's such and like Matt Fraction's Hawkeye is almost a very like meta commentary on comics. It makes fun of itself. It makes fun of the character of Hawkeye, a character who people picked on for so long, but now you can't pick on him because A, he's a badass in the movies, but B, he just picks on himself, and it's like, oh, I can't pick on you now.
Yeah, I mean, he's fully aware.
Yeah, he's fully aware. Like, I'm
unprepared for all of this.
I'm a dude with a bow. None of this makes any sense.
The city is flying, and I've got a bow and arrow.
Yeah, none of this makes any sense. One thing I did want to point out that was really cool that happened just in the last year is the resurrection of sorts of the X-Men. Post Civil War and House of M that happened at the beginning of the decade, or just before the beginning of the decade. You had mutants get taken off the map. They were down to 198. And then there was a big fight that happened between, Fox and Marvel, where Marvel's like, so we're just going to like not write a whole bunch of stuff about X-Men so they don't have any more material to like make movies out of.
Yep. They're going to just keep playing that greatest hits of how many times can we retell the Dark Phoenix saga?
Like 5 more times.
Let me retell the Dark Phoenix saga. Someone reboot the Fantastic Four again, and Sony, give me like 3 more, like at least 2 more real bad Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, so what
last 10 years has been interesting.
Yeah, but in the last year, they've gotten all that worked out now. Like, Disney just bought Fox. You know, the X-Men are back, baby. And they were like, hey, let's get like Jonathan Hickman, one of the greatest X-Men writers of all time, to come back and, I don't know, reset everything. Not reset. It didn't get rebooted, but we're like, we want to make mutants as cool as they used to be.
Yeah.
They got their own island now.
Yeah, they got their own fucking island and shit. And they're all like polyamorous and shit. Because they're just like, we gotta fuck because we gotta keep the species going right now.
What's their island? It's their own dragon cave.
I believe Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Wolverine are actually in a 3-way relationship right now in the comics.
Very nice. Yeah. I always wanted that for them, to be honest.
Yeah, like they just got past all their differences and they're just like, yeah, let's do this. Like
could they just like all agree to like, you know, just be snarky and
it's all like.
I disagree with this. Scott is literally the worst. So no.
And I think
it's not our choice. If Jean likes him, she likes him.
And I think the way that people figured this out is that they look, because it doesn't say it in the comics. They're like very chum with each other in the comics right now. But somebody pulled up the blueprints for the new like X Mansion or whatever, and their 3 rooms are the only ones that have like connecting doors between them.
Nice.
And somebody was like, wait a minute, why do they have like
what's that room in the middle? Why are there so many load-bearing walls?
Right. So, like, Hickman's back. He's writing X-Men. He wrote Powers of X and House of X. And those were 2 of the top sellers just in the last year. And again, I think a lot of these comics that you're seeing come out from, you know, Hickman, from Zdarsky, from Cates, these are all comics that you'll see really making their way onto the big screen because they're making such big differences. Zdarsky's run on Daredevil alone. At the beginning of the decade, if you told me, James, you're going to love Daredevil, I'm going to be like, the fuck I will.
Who?
He's a dumb character.
Ben Affleck? No.
And then
What's next? He's Batman?
Yeah, and then I read Zdarsky's fucking run on Daredevil. I'm like, I'm genuinely interested in the character and now want to go back and read other really good runs. I've never read like the Frank Miller run or the Kevin Smith run. So I want to go back and get that. And I have a pretty good feeling that I think that Cates' run on Thor is going to do that to me too.
Yeah.
I'm going to read his run on Thor, which he says you do not have to have any knowledge of Thor whatsoever. They'll spell it all out for you at the beginning. But if a comic is good enough by one author, I really want to go back and check out the other things that people have done.
Hell yeah.
One of the, actually the next thing that's on your list was the one I wanted to bring up, was something that I didn't think was going to happen, which was Brian Michael Bendis leaving Marvel and going to work at DC.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that was just in the last year that happened. Like, holy fucking shit.
Because, I mean, look at the last, 10 plus years prior to that.
Was the Ultimates.
Yeah, it was Brian Michael Bendis running shit at Marvel.
Yeah, I wonder what it feels like for him to go to Marvel movies.
I don't know. I think it'd be kind of
knowing
refreshing.
that he like influenced so much of the creation of those stories.
Well, like, yeah, I mean, imagine what it felt like, I don't know, for Stephen King to see any of the trillions of movies based on shit that he's watched and him go like, huh, okay.
Well,
like,
we have a hint of that because of how much he hates The Shining and how vocal he's been about how much he hates Stanley Kubrick's work.
Right, and all of that is fine, but that's not what I'm not talking about. His critique of the material based off his work. I'm talking about the feeling he must have knowing he's responsible that this got made. And I don't know how much Stephen King knows about the movie.
Like, what does Straczynski think when he goes to see a Thor movie? Like,
right,
he wrote the definitive run on Thor. In just like what happens when you go to see that in theaters, and you're just like, holy fuck, I did that. Like they're taking scenes literally from the thing that I made, and it's up there with a very sexy man acting this out.
And 5,000 people worked on it, and it cost $180 million. And I'm just watching it on screen with apparently a billion other people.
Yeah, it's nuts.
I did that.
Yeah, that's so fucking cool to think about.
Well, now you're making me think about like how weird it is to like go see a movie like as a film producer. You're like, I know the cost of every fucking frame of this movie. That's $5 right there. That's you're just like, what the shit? Like it's a weird way to put yourself into a different situation.
We took 47 takes of this scene, and every one cost $8,000.
When we talk about DC, we have to mention Jeff Johns. He led us into the decade with things like Blackest Night and Brightest Day. He redefined the Green Lanterns. Green Lantern, as you know him now, was Jeff Johns completely, and then he becomes like head of DC. They were like,
that cemented him as being like, okay, you do the DC stuff now.
Yeah, like that's absolutely insane, and I'm super excited about it. But we would be remiss if we didn't mention at least one thing that happened in the decade, which got people's hackles up a little bit, and that was Captain America turning evil.
Oh, wow.
Remember that was a thing that happened.
Oh yeah, it was It made normal news. That's how big of a deal it was.
Yeah, it made normal news. Like people were
I would consider
outraged.
it's like the death of Superman.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, they were equating it to that. They're like, "Holy shit, you just fucked up like all of the history of this character.
Yep.
What is wrong with you?"
And even though it happened in a comic book, there was so much of the non-comic book fandom that cared because they're all fans of Captain America, the movies.
Well, and because he represents an ideal, right? Like I remember very distinctly when Superman died. It was like a JFK moment. Like we were all sitting around the dinner table. I was in 6th grade. News is on in the background while we're having dinner, and they're like, "This is a breaking news story. Like Superman is dead," and they just treated it like serious. And then of course that's how it starts. And it's like, coming out this Wednesday will be the death of Superman comic. Superman will die. And I remember my mom like either got me out of school early or took me in late so that I could go in and actually get the comic.
Oh, that's
like
awesome.
the day of. And that's what it was always like for Captain America. That news broke that he's like, "Hail Hydra, bitches," and everybody lost their collective shit. They're like, "Holy fuck, Captain America's evil. He's apparently always been evil. When the fuck did this happen?" And by the way, go if you don't do it, but if you ever go back and listen to our podcast, the week that broke, we were like, "This will all sort itself out, guys. Calm the fuck down."
There's a reason it's the last page on the last panel of this comic book. Let's see what happens next month.
Right, exactly. It was just like, it took about a good year for that to happen. But it did happen. And this was all part of a story that went on throughout the Marvel Universe. This was something that happened in the last decade, was the big Axis change where they took all the heroes and made them villains, but kept them hero-like. Like there was the Iron Man, where he creates an app that basically can make you perfect using like nanobot technology, but you have to pay like a certain amount to the app every month to basically be the perfect human being. He gave Daredevil his sight back to be a dick.
Yeah.
And was like, "Here's what the world looks like. By the way, if you don't pay like thousands of dollars for my app per month, you're just going to lose your sight in like 3 hours." Like it was a dick move, but there was an evil wave of Marvel heroes at the time. That
And
they
then you
did.
had the villains, like when you had Hobgoblin becoming Spider.
Doc Ock.
Doc Ock. It was
Doc
Doc
Ock
Ock becoming Spider-Man.
Yeah, that was
Was
creepy.
it not Spectacular
Yeah,
Spider-Man?
that was weird, huh?
Yeah.
Superior Spider-Man.
But it's considered one of the best Marvel titles in the last 10 years was Superior Spider-Man. Like people just like, they didn't like it at first, but then they're like, "Fuck, I really actually do like this." And I feel like when we talk about comics in the last decade, there are just things that we didn't mention that just go strong no matter what, like Batman. Batman just goes.
Yeah.
Like, it's Batman. People buy Batman. But Batman got cool spin-offs, like an award-winning book called Gotham Central, which I am halfway through and keep forgetting to finish it.
Ooh.
But Gotham Central is literally about the GCPD.
Very cool.
And like what it is like to be an officer.
Yeah, what would you
Would
do?
you have a Batman?
There's also a TV show about that
no,
called
like,
Gotham.
no, like,
Which is also fantastic.
No, but the Gotham can't do stories where you can do in comic books because you just don't have the budget.
Yeah.
So like, what would you do? Is like your day, like you're like 3 weeks into your fucking like rookie year of being a cop, and you have to go arrest Clayface.
Right?
You're like, no.
What do you mean?
No.
Isn't he normally like 18 feet tall with knives for arms? Yeah. No.
You're like, yeah, that guy. Go put handcuffs on him. No.
What for?
I can't remember if it was Batman Begins or if it was Gotham, where like somebody asked Jim Gordon what he was doing in the GCPD, and he was like, "I asked to be transferred here," and they were like, "Nobody asked to be transferred to Gotham. Nobody does that." And it's true, and it's like what these beat cops are basically like, having to deal. And it's again, this won literary awards for how good the writing in this book is,
Very cool.
and just how they deal in a world with a Batman. So that was some of the comics that came out in the decade. There was a lot of stuff that happened, but that's just some of the more notable headlines and some of the cooler stuff. Now we can get into video games.
Okay,
because
yeah.
it was a big decade.
It was
for
a
video games.
very big decade for video games.
Do you have just a couple off the top of your head that you
Off the
loved?
top of my head, I'll start with something that everyone's probably going to go with that came out this decade, and that's Red Dead Redemption.
The original?
Yeah, 2010.
Wow.
Wow,
That's how
squeezing it in there.
That is how we started the decade.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we're ending it with a version of Red Dead Redemption 2, which no one can play. It's been fixed. I'm still joking about it, but it's still.
I mean, we definitely got Skyrim in 2011. That's a pretty big fucking deal. We got the best Mass Effect game, which was Mass Effect 2.
Skyrim
Portal 2 came out in
2011 does not feel like that's no. Skyrim's been out for 30 years.
It really has been out for 30 years.
Right, but we've had a lot of really interesting moves in genres, and you're about to talk about a few of them. But I want to point out one before you get started, and that was XCOM Enemy Unknown came out in 2012.
Fuck, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and that really brought back that entire genre.
It did, and
There's so many games like that now.
I was an old school DOS XCOM player. And when I heard that like Firaxis was making a new XCOM, I was like, first off, I've played almost every XCOM game that's ever come out. I never played that first-person shooter one that's not really an XCOM game.
Yeah.
But the thing about XCOM games and their legacy is that the first one's really good. The second one is Terror from the Deeps. It's still an XCOM game. It uses the same original tech. That's fine. It's underwater. We'll figure a way to make that work. But then it just gets weird. It's like XCOM Apocalypse, where there's only one city and you have to defend the city. XCOM Interceptor, where it's a third-person shooting, flying simulator. Enforcer, third-person action mech game.
Okay.
I've played a lot of weird XCOM games. So XCOM sequels or remakes they don't work. And then we saw the trailer for the XCOM Firaxis game, and I was like, holy shit, XCOM's back. Not only is XCOM back, but it's such a niche genre. And to hear so many people say, I would normally never play a game like that, but I played XCOM and I loved it.
Yep.
And I was like, man, that warms my fucking heart, because everybody's doing the same things that we did as kids. Like in playing the original XCOM, you would like rename your soldiers to like your friends or or your boss or whatever, and then you would actually form relationships with these characters.
And if one of them died, you were devastated.
Yeah, you were devastated. And so people getting into XCOM like that just blew my fucking mind, that just strategy games found home and new life with gamers that normally would not have done something like that.
I'll 100% cop to that. When I saw XCOM Enemy Unknown, the Firaxis one, I was like, that is not my kind of game, but I'm looking at this and I think I want to play it. And then I picked it up and I beat it like less than a week later. And I was like, oh my God.
I don't know if
that was amazing.
I don't know if James did this to you as he did to me. Whenever he was playing the new XCOM, he would tell me about what I'm doing in the game and how I've been getting on along with everybody else. And it was very interesting to find out the adventures I've been going on in XCOM, just because he decided to name one of the characters after me.
That is amazing. I'm going to throw one more game out there that came out this decade that'll probably blow a few minds, and that's Alan Wake.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
2010.
Oh, wow.
And still one of my favorite games of all
Still
time.
can't get a sequel?
Yeah. It would be nice if it got a sequel. Remedy has made a lot of other games since then, including Control, which came out this year. But yeah, Alan Wake, very, very cool game. One that you might actually really like if you've not played it.
I know I haven't. I've heard it's really good.
Basically about an author struggling with living inside his own works. It's very cool.
Yeah, it sounds very cool. So we can't talk about this decade without mentioning probably one of the most prolific things that happened in video games, which is the rise of roguelikes or Soulsborne games.
Oh, well, yeah, I would actually say that those are significantly separate genres. I would actually consider Soulsborne games more of a Metroidvania.
Okay, I can see that.
Than a roguelike, with one very specific difference in that in a Soulsborne game, you advance by killing bosses, whereas in a Metroidvania, you advance by learning new skills and backtracking.
Right.
I just feel like that's splitting pixels. Like that's just, which is also a very good
appreciate
name
that
for a
turn of phrase.
Like that's a very good name for a podcast.
Probably
I
already
just
taken.
invented.
Probably already
Yeah.
taken. So yeah, the Soulsborne thing was a thing that happened in this decade. I mean, we just saw Sekiro win Game of the Year at the Game Awards.
Yeah, Dark Souls, the original Dark Souls, which was kind of a remake of Demon Souls for the PlayStation 3, which is a very small sleeper hit. But Dark Souls, the original, which I think set the standard for the entire genre, came out in 2011.
Wow. That's crazy to think about. Yeah, that entire genre has just boomed and picked up, and we're seeing more and more games really try and adapt the formula. Some of them work, some of them don't. I think Lords of the Fallen or something was the name of one that like tried.
Oh
and
yeah,
wasn't
they
very
tried.
good.
And that studio is still making games. They made the one they did after that was basically a Soulsborne game, but in the future, and you kind of wore like different mech suits.
Okay.
And the sequel just came out, and I don't know why I'm losing the name of it right now, but it's probably the best work outside of From Software that's been put into that genre.
Right.
I know exactly the game that you're talking about. I just cannot remember the name.
Yeah,
I
I'm
did
having
see
a hard time with
Code
the
Vein
name
looked
right
fun
now.
though. I haven't tried Code Vein yet, but it looks fun.
It does look fun. It looks like someone's idea of what fans really want from a Soulsborne game.
The anime. They want anime.
It's like if I made it anime and still made it just like hard as
Crushingly
coffin
hard.
nails, like let's do that.
And so we had also in this decade, really, I believe, in my opinion, the rise of the indie games.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You had more and more people creating games in the indie space. And not only are they creating games in the indie space, but they were being backed by major companies.
Yeah, I can list, I mean, let's see, just in the indie space this decade, I have on my favorite games of the decade list, Gone Home, Tacoma by the same studio. Let's see here, Hotline Miami, very obvious one. Papers, Please, obvious one. Journey to a lesser extent, but still an indie.
Yeah, still an indie, funded by Sony, but an indie title.
Undertale is in here. Let's see, What Remains of Edith Finch, Into the Breach, Ori and the Blind Forest. Should round out that list.
And you can't even, like, it's hard to convince me that Ori and the Blind Forest is an indie studio, but it is.
Yeah, no, the studio had like, I think like 10 people made that game.
And it's fucking gorgeous, and it's now makes a lot of money for Microsoft.
Yeah, and the sequel's coming out very soon. Yeah.
Another thing that we saw in the games industry this year was, or in the last decade, was the slow collapse of traditional game purchasing. Think about this. At the beginning of the decade, we had to go to GameStop. We could buy games online, but you just didn't do it as often.
Yeah, I definitely bought Red Dead Redemption 2 and Mass Effect 2 and Portal at a GameStop.
Yeah, like we had Steam, but like Steam really wasn't as prolific.
True.
It was popular, but it was not the monstrosity that it is today.
Yeah, and you could not get console games outside of a retail store.
You know, I was used to I would get small indie games for downloadable content. Things like whenever, because this is something that was released, the remake of the DuckTales game.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, I could just download it, and it was like 500 megs. It was fucking wonderful. It's also one of the best remakes of any video game ever.
Absolutely.
But I normally it was just DLCs. You're like, oh, you get this additional level or these couple of maps or something, and you just download that. But you always had to go into a store. And now, in the last 10 years, it's I don't go to your store. Don't send me a physical copy of anything ever. Just let me have the code and install it before it comes out.
Yep. And I got
like 3 days ahead of time for extra downloads.
I got DuckTales when it came out, the night it came out, and I got really ripped, and I just fucking played me some DuckTales.
Oh, God.
We literally did the same thing in our different apartments.
Yeah.
Like, we were both like, hey, DuckTales is out. Cool. I'm getting shit-faced and playing this. So am I. I was like, you have fun.
Yep.
You just get to the moon level and just like put the controller down and listen to the music.
Oh,
for
God,
like
I know, right?
Minutes.
So yeah, traditional game purchasing is still available, but like not many people do it anymore.
Yeah, it's all but gone. I mean, so much to the point where I'm kind of surprised that GameStop hasn't died this decade.
Now, I think that it's important to note here that there is a negative side to this, because we saw the rise of microtransactions, content that's on disc but locked out, and then being charged for it. These were all nasty things that happened, and we're still not past them right now. These are things that we talked ad nauseum about on this podcast.
And unfortunately, some of these things aren't going away.
No.
As much as the backlash against the industry has said, hey, stop doing that kind of thing, we have to kind of look at it as this is no more than a commercial that plays during the TV show that I'm getting.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is the TV show that I'm also paying $60 to watch, so it kind of fucking sucks.
Yeah.
But that is the nature of the thing right now, and we're just not enough. The game industry has made too much money.
Yeah.
In fact, they make more money than the entire film industry.
Oh, easily.
Yeah,
Easily.
you know, like the fact that Disney hasn't bought out like 17 game studios to just make more video games instead of movies is kind of ridiculous.
Well, the reason they don't is because everyone has failed. Everyone who attempts to get into that space has failed. Amazon has all but failed to break into video games, and they're the richest company on the planet.
They're finally. In the last 10 years, they announced a game, and has been super delayed to the fact it might come out next year.
Yeah,
like
Google,
that's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, Amazon announced a game way back at the beginning of this podcast, like 7 fucking years ago.
Yeah,
and then it's just now maybe seeing the light of day in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Google is about to be completely irrelevant in gaming again. But after, like, there's no doubt in my mind.
Hey, remember the Ouya? That thing that happened?
Every console that tries to break into the market is either vaporware or something like the Ouya. And Disney is smart enough to do something like hire a studio that makes games to do it.
No, I just meant buy them so they could just tell these studios to make them for them.
Right, but I mean, you
just
look
collect
at
that money at the end.
Avengers Endgame at this point is the highest grossing movie of all time, and it fucking wishes it did 1 year of Call of Duty's numbers.
It's true. Also, in this last decade, we had something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's the rise of the 0451 genre.
Yeah, immersive sims.
Immersive sims. If you're unfamiliar with the term, the original Deus Ex or any of the Deus Ex games, those are all immersive sims. BioShock is really the game that brought it to the forefront.
Yeah, BioShock brought it back. I think BioShock came out in 2008, but we've had plenty since then.
Yeah, we've had
lots of
sequels
immersive sims. I mean,
yeah.
just recently we've had Prey, we've had The Outer Wilds.
Yep.
I
Which
do not
is
call them
arguably
that at all. This is weird. This is I just call those action adventure games.
Yeah, so
that's just the generic. They're all action adventure.
So
games
you're
to
missing
me.
very key mechanics there that set them apart from other like action adventure games.
Yeah.
To me, an action adventure game is something a lot like either the Batman Arkham series or Uncharted or God of War, Spider-Man. Even though there are very slight RPG elements.
Those are definitely action adventure.
When you talk
games.
about a BioShock game or any 0451 game, you think of like System Shock and Deus Ex. These are games where every item you pick up and everything matters in the sense that everything interacts with everything else.
Right. Yeah, I just always thought that I looked at it as they just added some annoying RPG elements into an action adventure game.
Right, but the 0451 game is a very specific genre.
Yeah, and the fun video game history fact, if you didn't know this, is that this all started with, was it either System Shock or Deus Ex?
It was System Shock.
It's System Shock, and one of the door codes is 0451 for Fahrenheit 451.
Yep.
And
it's the very first door in the game, and
Yeah.
you can find the code somewhere else, which is kind of a staple of the genre, but if you just know the code, you can just get in.
Right, and so other games started using the code that are of the same kind of genre, and it just kind of weirdly became its own thing. So it's either the immersive sim genre or the 0451 if you're one of those pretentious people.
Correct.
Which would be me.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. But I love these games. I love Deus Ex, both of them that just came out. The Mankind Divided and
Human Revolution.
Like, those are fantastic games. You had Dishonored.
Oh, Dishonored. Dishonored's on my games of the decade list. Dishonored. I haven't finished Dishonored 2, but I do very much like it, and I think it might be the stronger game of the two. But Dishonored took that immersive sim and put it in a place and in a setting that we've never seen before, and made that setting so cool and so unique that no one's really tried to copy it, but it was obviously very successful.
It's actually so my sister actually jumped in the chat.
Oh, okay.
And she said she actually she prefers having the disc to play games. And for a lot of people, that's still the same case. Like we have people, we know people that collect video games,
Right.
and they like to have their special editions and everything.
Right.
And I think it's a little bit of there's a little bit of a gap. Like some of us, like the moment I've found out that there could be a purely digital future, like whenever that occurred to my brain, I was like, holy shit, this needs to happen. I can't wait for this to happen. But there's also that part of me that likes collecting shit and owning things that sometimes still wants to, open up a game and have that new video game smell. But then I haven't had it in a very long time. It's been over like a year or so since I opened up a game, like instead of having a digital one.
Yeah.
And you got the physical copy of Death Stranding.
Yeah.
And I took a smell of it and went, nope, I'm glad we don't do that anymore, because those things reek.
I mean, it's really up to what your preferences are. I don't think that physical media is going away anytime soon.
It's just changing.
It's
just
going to
changing.
be a lot more niche. When you think about like active Blu-ray collectors.
Yeah,
these
when you
days.
think of when I'm thinking about when I'm going to go buy a physical game at this point, it's like me dropping $150 for like Final Fantasy Heaven's Sword with a giant dragon statue.
Exactly.
Like that's
and to
what
Hector's point about people buying like physical Blu-rays of things, in the case of like HD Blu-ray, like super high definition discs, which are actually just hard drives that hold a fucking movie. Yeah, it's actually cheaper and faster to have them send you the thing and plug it in. Than to actually try to download. You just can't.
Especially
stream it.
when
There's
it comes
no
to-
infrastructure right now that can do that kind
when
of
it comes
shit.
to 4K content and before long 8K content, it's going to become very difficult to stream at that fidelity unless we have a massive infrastructure upgrade.
Yeah. Also, in this last decade, we had Nintendo make a fully 3D handheld.
Yep.
Which required no glasses.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was in the last decade. I thought that came out. I thought that came out prior to that.
No.
no.
Last
that
decade.
was only 10 years ago.
It wasn't even 10 years ago. I
And
don't
we
think.
basically got failed like Nintendo consoles, and then finally got the real successor to the Wii, which was the Switch.
With a Switch, yeah, exactly.
You had this bridged year, a couple of years of the Wii U, which basically just shat itself, and then we got the Switch.
Yeah, and but me being the ardent defender of the Wii U, the console as itself was.
I saw your
silly.
Wii U the other day in your house.
Yeah,
I did.
It is silly. It's a silly thing,
the
but some
bookcase of
very,
shame.
very, very good games came out for that console.
Yeah, there was a lot of great games, but nobody bought it because
Nobody
nobody
bought
understood it. There was a marketing, and this is just just a proven fact in the history of Nintendo when it comes to the Wii and the Wii U. Nintendo didn't know how to properly market the Wii U, and that was an issue for them because everybody at that point had bought the Wii. Like to this day, there's still like Wii games that are coming out. Like that's how popular that system is.
That's super weird.
But the Switch was able to market itself differently by having a different name, by saying, no, this is a different console. This is not the same
and also
thing.
doing this.
Yes,
a lot.
also that.
A lot of snapping.
Yeah.
They were Thanos before Thanos.
Yeah.
But the Wii U, they had a stumbling block. Everybody thought it was just an add-on and they could just go buy, a tablet and they put that on with their Wii.
It was confusing.
It was confusing for a lot of consumers.
Yeah. And I swear to God, if the Wonderful 101 had come out for either the Wii or the Switch, it would be one of the best-selling games in Nintendo.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, diversity in all things gaming. We're seeing a lot more prolific game developers from all around the world, different races. Of course, we've had some really great female-led games in the last decade. Again, not something you saw very often for a very long time. The women were either kind of treated like garbage in the industry or just weren't in the industry. And there's been such a push to actually get more diversity in games, and it's been a fantastic thing to see. But we do have to talk about one of the weird things that happened in the last decade, which was the mini console boom/bust.
Yeah, I've still never bought a mini console. There's been one that I've been interested in. That's
for a while,
the Sega.
We toyed around with them for like so many years because it was companies that were toy manufacturers got the rights to put an Asteroids little joystick controller out that plugged directly into your TV and it ran on batteries. And we had those for a really long time. I think I probably had one in a box somewhere. Yeah. And they were shitty and they were kind of fun and they were really cheap. But then finally, specifically Nintendo saw how well those things were doing and saying like, well, we can make money off of that. And they released a very small limited edition of the original NES, little pocket edition kind of thing. And it was brilliant. And it worked really well.
the mini NES came out, and basically we all lost our collective shits over it. Like it was the Christmas present of that year. They were sold out everywhere. Everybody freaked out.
I remember we found out a place was getting a shipment and we went to try and get them.
And they were done.
Sold out half an hour before you got here. And like, all right.
It was crazy how people went nuts for these things. And they're still coming out. We're not... I think we're at the end of it now. I think the last quality one to come out is the Sega Genesis Mini.
No, that's the last one that I want. I want the Sega Genesis Mini, and because that is the last one that I can see as having a bunch of games I like to play, a bunch of games that I'll have fond memories of, and some that I never got to play because maybe they just didn't come to my local rental store. Growing up in the middle of fucking nowhere. I think that's the last one that I truly want, and then after that, like the Sony one, the original, PlayStation one.
I'm waiting for that to go to dump.
I'm getting $10. $10. I will give it. I would $10. So this is to bring up the one thing that I'll say was my best game of the decade, which was Destiny. Amazon made this stupid fucking Destiny Ghost thing.
Oh, the Alexa Ghost.
The Alexa Ghost. And it was $100 and something when it came out, and no one bought it because it was a worthless piece of shit that didn't fucking function.
It was just an Alexa.
Yeah, it was, but it didn't even work. You had to have another Alexa for it to work.
Oh, God.
That was one of the biggest problems. You had to spend like $200 to get this thing. They eventually put it down for $10, and I regret that I didn't buy one because now they don't make them anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's. I don't even know how I got on that side tangent.
But how can we talk about the decade in gaming if we do not talk about one of the biggest things to happen, which is the rise of esports?
Oh yeah, I mean back in 2010, I mean TI was barely a thing.
Yeah.
Like
that's insane to think about. Like I remember like Evo being a thing.
Yeah.
Counter-Strike.
But I was in the way that Comic-Con was a thing like in the 90s.
Yeah, no, that's the way. Like, I just remember like Counter-Strike for years. Counter-Strike and was it like not
Quake?
Unreal. Quake had a bunch of tournaments. Unreal had some tournaments. Specifically, I just remember Counter-Strike being the one that anybody gave a shit about.
Right. At the beginning of the decade, like nobody really gave a shit about these things except for like us hardcore people who like loved watching clips of Evo that we would watch in real player, because there just wasn't live streaming back then of the tournament. So that was really cool to see. But like now we have things like the Dota International. We have the Overwatch League.
The entire Overwatch League.
The Overwatch League, which is cities Actual cities have sports teams that play video games
There are
now.
two here in Texas, and and then both of them hate
do not
each
like
other.
each
Yeah,
other.
it is the football of esports at this time. At this point, it is the NFL of esports.
It is. It's absolutely insane to think about. And, Brooklyn's talking about in chat, like how Evo back in the day was like less than 100 people in attendance.
Yep.
It was called Battle by the Bay back then. And yeah, it's absolutely true. Like, I remember being that guy I knew what Evo was because I wanted to go to it and I would see clips of it online and I was like, this is so cool. Like someday, like I'm going to go there. I'm going to play Street Fighter. It's going to happen. Like I would tell myself every year, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. But always in the back of my head, it was like, this is never going to take off. This is never going to be like the thing that I'm so passionate about. It's never going to be that big.
Yeah.
And it just, all of a sudden it's blown the fuck up. And I'm just like, again, it's one of those moments that warms my heart because I'm like, man, if 16-year-old me could have seen this, if I could tell 16-year-old me like, bro, someday you will get the chance to go to Evo and it's not going to be like 50 people. It's going to be like thousands of people. And you're going to go there with like friends and you're going to drink and you're going to have a good fucking time. And you're not going to care if you win or lose. You're just going to go and have a blast and just enjoy the company of your fellow nerds. Like that's so cool to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I partially blame the rise of Evo, and I shit you not, on Super Smash Brothers Melee.
You think so?
I remember being in high school, and when the GameCube came out, someone could just bring it to a classroom, and some of the classrooms have little TVs with VCRs or DVD players in them for presentations or movie day or whatever the fuck's going on. And someone would just find which teacher had that TV, hook up their GameCube, plug in 4 controllers, and bam, we were having a Smash tournament at lunch.
Right.
And we did this every day at lunch for years. And God, it was fun. And then as soon as I got to college and I realized that I could watch people, some of the best people in the world, play Smash Brothers Melee online, all of a sudden I was hooked. And I was like, how the fuck is he doing that? I've been playing this game for 4 years. I didn't know that was even possible.
Right.
And it really got me into, honestly, everything about professional gaming, and not just esports, but also speed running. And
which I feel like is a thing that existed in air quotes before.
Oh,
but
sure.
It wasn't the thing that it is now.
Yeah, when we look at like the history of speedrunning and when like all the speedrun archive like sites started posting up, that was pretty much like very late last decade, early this decade, and was nowhere near what it is now. It was this decade, I think it was 2010 or 2011 when I found out about the GDQ events and started following them. And I mean, now if they don't make $2 million, a season, it's weirdly disappointing.
Yeah, it's really strange. But yeah, esports in general is just such a fascinating thing that obviously we could talk for hours and hours and hours about. But it is one of the bigger things to happen over the last decade.
Yeah.
And, when I do talk about the Overwatch League, again, that's one of those things if you told like 16-year-old me, by the way, cities are going to have teams. Yeah. And they're going to have rivalries. Yeah. And you're going to be cheering for them and like giant stadiums. I would be like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Like, that's 16-year-old me, very angry.
Yeah. Just like, what do you mean there's going to be a Houston team for a video game I love, and they're going to play the team from Dallas, and I'm going to have opinions about it?
Right, I'm actually going to have...
I'm going to know who the players are.
Right?
Yeah. Know things about their lives.
I'm going to know their profiles.
I would have... To say, like, you were going to sit down and have dinner with those players at some point, I'd been like, no, that would be weird. How would that even happen?
That's a really good point Brooklyn makes. He said, people are eating because of games.
It's true.
And I love it, too.
Stream on... Yeah, that's another thing. That's another 16-year-old me moment. It's like, dude, people are going to stream online, and they're going to get paid for streaming online just for playing games. Yeah. That's going to put food on their table or pay their rent.
I don't know. If you told 16-year-old me that it's like, hey, when you're in, like, your 20s and 30s, there's going to be hot girls on the internet playing video games and dudes are going to give them money. And I'm going to go, yeah, sounds about right.
Story checks out.
Sounds like something I would do.
Yep, story checks out completely. Just real quick, AR gaming. Right?
Yeah.
Pokemon Go, Ingress, these were things that didn't exist in the decade.
That's
in fact,
true.
mobile gaming in general really came into popularity in the last decade.
Pokemon Go had a really hot 30 minutes.
Yeah, it really did.
Oh no, I still know a shitload of people that play Pokemon Go to this day.
Yeah.
They're still posting like, check it out, I gotta go get this character, I gotta walk over here, I gotta get my fucking steps in to level this thing up, and you're like, okay, cool, and that's done. It's weird that like a cell phone augmented reality game actually has had a positive impact on so many people's lives. Like even for just walking around and getting outside their fucking houses or going and meeting other people. That's what Ingress was for us, was meeting a bunch of weird ass people that also like playing a game.
You bring
on
up
their
a
phone.
really good point though, Tony. And of course these things have existed prior to this decade, but I feel like community in gaming in general has expanded so much. Like, yeah, you were in the decade prior on the Bungie forums, but it was like you and like a bunch of people that were on the Bungie forums. Now, like a game like Death Stranding,
now we have Reddit.
Right now you have Reddit, and like Death Stranding has like 100,000 people on their Reddit, and they're just all talking about Death Stranding, and it's just the communities have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger because the platforms have become so much more accessible. You no longer have to go to the Bungie forums.
That's just the exchange of information has become easier and more centralized, where we can have things like Reddit that go beyond just a specific forum where you had to go out of your way. We've been on forums, our entire fucking lives at this point. And when we got on the internet, we discovered what forums were. And we're like, oh, it's a place where I can talk to people, and then you find people that want to talk about the same subjects. And you get very niche. And that's the point of Reddit, is you can get very niche about your things, but it's one centralized location. It's a hub. And now we finally have those hubs. We have things like Discord, where it can be a hub where you can connect all these different groups together for all these different interests. And you have Reddit that can combine these things together. And then you can have your integrations with things like Xbox Live or PlayStation's, whatever the fuck that's called. And you can talk to each other and play games at the exact same time on different systems. It's fucking amazing.
Yeah, really, the future is
terrifying
now.
at the same time.
Absolutely.
We had a rise in remakes over the last decade.
Oh, that's just. I mean, I expect that over every 10 years, especially like because of our generation. We're having this like fond memories for your childhood, and the moment we saw the trailer for the DuckTales remake, I was like, sold. I loved playing the game as a kid. I'm done. Yeah. Whenever they did the Toe Jam and Earl Kickstarter to remake that, which is, it's good. I never finished my review. It's okay. There's my review. It was like, holy shit, I have to have this because it's Toe Jam and Earl. It's a game that I care about. It's poking that little part of your brain that goes, hey, remember? And you're just like, yeah, I remember. And you're like, okay, let's do that. And I think we're going to keep seeing that going forward. It's going to be like every 7 or 8 years, you'll get a refresh of something from the past, like 10 years or 20 years coming back. And that's just the nature of all of it anyway.
Sure. Let's see. We had good superhero video games.
That's true.
It's still weird.
And isn't that weird to think about?
Well, we had good superhero games that weren't just Spider-Man.
No, one of my favorite video games of
one of them is definitely Spider-Man.
Yeah,
one of my favorite video games of the decade is Batman Arkham Knight, and also Batman Arkham Asylum, and also Batman Arkham City.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's three.
Did those all three come out in the last decade?
I think so. I couldn't be sure about Arkham Asylum.
I'm pretty sure Arkham Asylum was prior to.
Yeah,
maybe
at least 2 out of the 3.
But that being said, like, those are probably the best superhero games.
Those are the games
have been.
Those are the games that fundamentally changed what a superhero game
Injustice.
It is, yeah.
Injustice
absolutely.
came out not only affecting the DC universe storyline, the comic book universe, but it changed the way fighting games function and how you tell stories within fighting games. That is amazing to me. If you told me like the guys that made Mortal Kombat are going to change fucking DC Comics for the better, and you're like, okay, how are they going to add Scorpion to that?
Right.
I would have been like, no, that doesn't make any sense. But it happened, and it's fucking amazing. My favorite DC storyline of all time in the comic books comes from a fucking video game.
Yeah.
It's weird.
We had the rise and fall of Telltale Games that happened in the last decade.
That's true, yeah. And I mean,
and now the rise back, I guess.
Yeah, well, ish. I mean, they're back. We'll say they're back. I don't know. I don't know how much rising they'll do, but I hope they do some.
Well, they are putting the Batman games back on. I know this is not a news podcast, but they did say the Batman games are going to be coming back, and they're going to be adding new DLC for those.
I'm good with that. The Batman games are really good. Yeah. And the Walking Dead games, at least the first couple, were. I mean,
they were fun.
Everyone was playing them. Everyone was playing them because they were a good price point, and they came out episodically, and people got really into those stories.
I think it was probably the Game of Thrones game that jumped the shark. I think
when they started,
I think that's whenever it was it's too much. You reached too far.
Yeah,
you reach for the sun, and now you got your wings are melting.
Yeah, pretty much.
Capcom has had a hell of a decade. We're talking Street Fighter 4 and 5. You're talking about Devil May Cry's. You're talking about Monster Hunter taking the U.S. by storm this decade.
Not just the U.S., literally the entire world.
Yeah, but like it had been such a niche thing in the U.S. and it sold so well. It sold so amazingly well. I think my favorite detail is that Resident Evil 6 and Resident Evil 7 both came out this decade. And holy fuck, just look at those
One
two
of those
games.
is good.
Look at those two games and look at what happened to Capcom, because there's no better example than like old Capcom and new Capcom.
Yep, absolutely. It's crazy to think about. Another one of those 16, like if you told 16-year-old me moments, and I wouldn't believe you, is if you told me that Persona was going to become popular.
Oh yeah,
Because I played the first two back in the day, and I was like, yeah, this is fun. Like I got some art books for it. Like it's just, it's weird.
No
it's
one
like
likes that.
Out of nowhere, like Atlas is
people
is,
have it in. Oh god, people love those.
like look at games like Catherine.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine trying to describe this game to somebody and be like, this is going to be a really popular game, by the way.
Yeah, it's another Death Stranding where it's like, what do you do? Why?
Right. You're going to move boxes?
Who's going to play that?
You move big rocks so you can climb up a hill to get dream things.
Yeah. Also, there's sheep involved, and
Yeah.
most of it's kind of like a older YA novel about a guy and his girlfriend.
Did that actually come out in the
it did.
Yeah,
it did.
Because that game was a 360 game, so that was like at the tail end.
Uh-huh.
So all right, so we're getting.
We didn't get the new generation of consoles until 2014.
We went through an entire console generation.
Yeah.
In these 10 years.
Yeah.
Because
Don't forget
next year, new ones come out.
Yeah, The Last of Us came out in 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for the PlayStation 3.
That's the end
How do
of the
y'all feel
PlayStation
about
3.
that? A lot of people are upset that console generations aren't sticking around to the 10-year idea, and they're going faster now.
Well,
it was always 5 years.
They were 5 before.
Well, but they went for a small period. It went to 10 years, like once.
Oh yeah,
And everybody's like, it's the 10-year thing. What we're doing now, and then everybody's doing iterative updates as well. So it's kind of like every 5 years ish.
I'm just like,
I feel like
I'm like fuck the foreplay with the iterative thing.
Yeah.
Just give me a new console.
As a
the closer we
PC
get to
gamer,
PC gaming is like that's when you need a new graphics card anyway. So yeah,
yeah. As a PC gamer, like changing my graphics card every 2 to 3 years, I'm like, that's about right. Yeah.
Let's see here. Destiny was a game that came out and has come back.
This entire decade was Destiny.
So we have to go through. Prior to that, you have to have Bungie leaving Microsoft.
You want to do the whole history? We're talking about Destiny.
No, that's the thing is you have to talk about they left Microsoft. Which is also a big ass fucking deal, buying themselves out from that.
Oh, yeah.
Then to go on to make Destiny, a deal that they made with Activision to make that, which in turn made a deal with Sony to give them even more money, and it failed. They were able within a year bring it back to its like day one numbers and surpass those.
Yep.
Continue down that train, release a second game that also kind of failed within a year, bring that back. And then also buy themselves out of the contract that they had with Activision. That's now twice in 10 years, leaving the people that were giving them money and saying, fuck you, we're doing it on our own.
It's been a fucking journey.
It's a roller coaster for
They've done things that no video game studio's ever done, especially dealing with that kind of money.
Yeah.
Kojima gets fired. Leaves Konami.
Hideo Kojima, the creator of Metal Gear Solid, and all of the subsequent games.
Created an amazing game demo called PT.
Yeah, and that was his swan song. That was his last thing he did for Konami.
A game that everybody loved.
Yeah.
Because my understanding of it is they were like, okay, we know you hate making the Snake games. Like, you're sick of them. You're done with them. You told that story and you're tired of it.
Yeah, what would you like to do?
And they were like, just give us a 5 and we'll let you do whatever the fuck you want. And he's like, fine, I'll give you 5, but I want Silent Hill. And they were precariously okay with that, and then for some reason making pachinko games now.
Yeah, well, they almost gave him Castlevania too, and that, oh man.
Why?
Castlevania was honestly probably better off without Kojima.
Oh no, I totally agree with that. Like, I don't want him in Castlevania, but in Silent Hill, yeah,
Silent Hill, yeah, 100%.
I love that demo and everything I've seen from Death Stranding. I'm like, I just really wish I can't wait for his horror game because that's when I might give a shit.
But he basically got fired from Konami, but like the building was on fire as he left.
Oh yeah, and now Konami just kind of makes
that fire at all.
Now Konami makes Silent Hill based pachinko machines and sucks, and everyone hates them. Fuck Konami.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think they'll go down. There'll be an interesting story if humanity exists in like 20 years about the downfall of Konami. Maybe they'll have
they'll
have a rise.
I want that documentary so bad.
We need to start doing that documentary now, so we can hit all the footage and people can be like, "This was the right choice to make."
Yeah.
So you can cut to them 20 years later, going, "That was a bad choice to make."
There is a really amazing journalistic essay on everything that happened with Kojima, with all kinds of facts and backed up with all kinds of letters from like internal corporate memos and stuff like that by George. I forget his last name. He goes by Super Bunny Hop on YouTube. Mm-hmm. If you ever want to know what happened with Kojima, look him up, Super Bunny Hop. It's the closest thing to games journalism I've ever seen on YouTube.
I cannot take anyone seriously who named themselves Super Bunny Hop.
Well, then
this is the problem.
Then you don't take Counter-Strike seriously.
No, I don't.
If you know why a thing is named what it's named, you know how much history that name entails.
Even though I know why it is, but to reach a broader audience, you can't call yourself something that fucking stupid.
You can to a gamer.
Hello and welcome to the Surly Nerd.
Yeah,
your news broadcast site.
We sound like a bunch of like if someone saw
people yelling about games and comics and shit. You mean the exact thing that our name entails?
Yeah, which is exactly what Super Bunny Hop is.
Okay, we gave Tony a minute to shine on about Destiny. We would be remiss if we didn't give Hector a few minutes to talk about The Witcher.
Okay, yeah, I'll take it. So the first Witcher game came out in 2007, so that's too early. But Assassin of Kings, which is the one James has played, came out in 2011. And almost finished. Came out in 2011. Does that look like a game that came out in 2011?
No, it still looks really good.
It's a good-looking game, right? It's obviously not up to like today's standards, but it's still...
That was the Witcher DLC, right?
No, the Assassin of Kings was Witcher 2.
Okay, so Assassin of Kings, Witcher's 2... And then, so I didn't know the names of all of them.
And in 2015, we got The Witcher 3, which for my money and probably a lot of other people's is the best game of the decade, period. I can't think of a better one. It's very close with a few others. The Last of Us is obviously on that list. So is God of War. And if I could just make a list of the best narratives in games, those three would be right at the top for the decade. But... yeah, The Witcher 2 came out and found its audience because The Witcher 1 was a very niche, very silly little game built on kind of like a Neverwinter style D&D battle system where you just kind of like click a few buttons and watch fights happen. Witcher 2 really made you feel a lot more like a Witcher. It was more dynamic, and you could tell how much they loved the world because they put as much detail into it as possible, like almost Kojima levels of detail. Like you knock over an ice bucket and the ice melts. If it starts to rain, all the people who do their day jobs huddle under huts, and things matter to the people in the game, which makes it feel like a real place. Then you got The Witcher 3 in 2015, which had all of that and much, much more, and their goal was always to make the area you were in feel like a real living, breathing place where real, actual adventures as Geralt of Rivia were happening. And I've still to this day never seen a game do anywhere near as well.
Right. One of the last things that I do want to talk about as we kind of wind down the game section of this is that there's been a lot of progress that has been made within the games industry over the last decade, which has been very important. We've talked about things like sexism in the workplace. Riot just had to fork over a lot of cash because
they did not win. They definitely
lost.
They definitely lost.
But sexism in the workplace. We're getting more diversity. Of course, we talked about that in gaming.
Yeah.
But we're seeing game developers start to speak out about things like crunch time, saying this is unhealthy for us to be living like this. We shouldn't be treated like we're just expendable. You have video game unions that are starting to form.
Yeah, there's a big movement to unionize the whole gaming industry.
That's something that I've been preaching on the show since we started it, was about video game unionization, getting everybody together to... you made these games. This is the most profitable industry like in the fucking world is making video games, and the employees are treated like shit. And I feel like that the next 10 years we actually can have that. The actual push. We've been getting to this point. It's coming to a head. We're finally making these changes. And I think one of the last things I also want to talk about just in video games, it's an in general statement, was about the change in storytelling, the types of games that we're able to tell. We talked about the rise of the indie developer a little bit, but we're able to now, major studios are now telling these deeply personal and interesting, weird, odd stories and heart-wrenching stories. And
Life is Strange.
Yeah, that's a
The Unfinished Swan.
Yeah, The Unfinished Swan.
That game is so sad.
What remains of Edith Finch
these
again.
are done by smaller independent studios, and in some cases done by very large studios.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can have this diversity in storytelling, the fact we can talk about things like mental illness in video games is amazing. The fact we can talk about divorce in a game is...
Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice,
all of these
illness.
things are... It's crazy to think that we can talk about people being crazy in video games. And have it make sense.
Yeah.
We can talk about societal issues and things like BioShock and how the economics of Ayn Rand make no sense whatsoever. And it's a fucking video game.
Yep.
So I love that we are now able to explore that in a way that functions as a story, is visually identifying and creative and pushing the boundaries of graphical capabilities and storytelling and emotional content and the ability to connect with your player base on a higher level.
Yeah.
That had existed prior to these last 10 years, but it did not seem like it had the culmination and the giant push that it has had now, and has become more effective in that type of storytelling.
Agreed. Well said.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, I have just a couple titles to mention. I don't expect a lot of back and forth. Just I feel like we would be remiss not to mention them
These
before the end of the
things also came
decade.
out? Yeah.
These things also came out and were good, and it would be bad if we did not mention them. I'll start with Spec Ops: The Line 2012. We haven't mentioned that yet. That
was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Let's see, Assassin's Creed Black Flag. That's the pirate one.
Yep.
That's the one that
was the
everyone loves.
only one that was slightly enjoyable.
Nier Automata.
Oh yeah, that was a weird one.
Yeah, excellent game. Let's see, Doom 2016.
Oh, it's such a big deal.
Yeah.
I still love that game. I still once a year I randomly install it and play like a level. I'm like, what is like? I don't know. I'm gonna play Doom.
Yeah,
for
and
a
it's
day.
awesome, and I
then
blew a
just
bunch of things head off, and then I forgot about it. But
then I
that's
immediately
fine.
uninstall it like the next day.
Yep. Let's see. What remains of? No. Sorry, that's we mentioned what remains of Edith Finch. Divinity: Original Sin.
Oh yeah, that's such a weird concept.
And its sequel.
I didn't expect to become as popular as it did.
Yep.
It's a very niche style of game, and then it had a Kickstarter.
Like a more
and
complicated version of Diablo.
Exactly. An obvious one that we didn't mention: Bloodborne.
That's true, Bloodborne.
Yeah, Bloodborne, huge deal.
One of my
huge deal for us.
One of my favorite games. That I'm literally wearing a Bloodborne hoodie.
We
right
kind of
now.
bonded over that game at HP.
Yeah.
Just talking about the spiders.
Yep, it was so cool. I was just trying to read every little interview before it came out and figure out what weapon I was going to use, and yeah, it was crazy.
And the last one, our Game of the Year 2019, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice.
Yeah.
Amazing game. I know a lot of people still haven't played it, but definitely it's worth your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now we have a bunch of entertainment things to discuss, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give Tony a moment that he can save the podcast episode so we don't lose all the stuff we just talked about.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Quick break. Does anyone need a beer?
Grab me another cider.
And because we have a wonderful button, I can run a commercial, which they pay us for. So I'm going to do that.
Yay!
Can we just run a 60-second ad block like every 60 seconds?
Is that how any of this works? And for those of you not watching on, if you're not watching,
You're not watching on Twitch.
You don't have to see the ad.
You don't have to see the ad. But those people don't pay us, so I would rather you see
pure
the ad.
unfiltered us when you're not watching on Twitch. But Twitch is what pays the bills.
Also,
so.
my favorite little thing is the fact they have a countdown, like with a timer that shows you're running a 60-second ad. Here you go.
Yeah. Oh, but also Brooklyn doesn't see them because he's a subscriber.
Yeah, and Brooklyn's a subscriber, so
that's even better.
That entire fucking paycheck. Okay, that year-long paycheck. If you look at that for a year of work, that's super not a lot.
No, we made.
But
that.
entirely, I believe, comes from Brooklyn. Like it's just him and like maybe Pitbull and Gouda. That's like it. Like the three of them.
Are we splitting entertainment into TV shows and movies?
I
Because
just
those are
have
two
it-
very,
I've got it
very
all
different
together.
things.
We've always had that battle of how do you decide
Yeah.
to differentiate between, because also entertainment encompasses everything that we do.
True, but like
How do you
TV
actually
shows
name
and movies
something?
are two very different things.
I know. I've got a lot.
Because
of
originally,
Yeah,
back when
okay,
we,
you're
back when we
good, you're
first
good.
started this, I also wanted to have a technology section
Yeah.
where we talked about things like new cell phones, new motherboards, and processors and shit.
Oh, what
Mostly
I-
because I want those people to send me those things.
I'll do what I
Back
did
in-
last time, but I'll cherry pick because these lists are too long.
That's an absurd list you've got there.
All right, I
Yeah.
need to
They're all
actually
important.
save this,
Okay,
so
yeah.
let's do that. File, save project as, and then find the keyboard. Hey, at least I turned it off.
Yeah, you didn't close all of our programs in our stream.
339. Oh look, I saved it and I turned the keyboard off.
All
Good for
right.
you.
Let's get crazy.
Yeah.
Ugh. You want to start or you want me to come back? I just
I can just start.
I mean, I should have started with that birth. That
You can just start with "and we're back."
Yeah.
If
All right. And we're back. So we are in the entertainment section, probably arguably the biggest thing for us to talk about for the last decade.
I don't know how long we went in the last one, but goddamn, that felt like an eternity as well.
We did go quite a while.
This last decade has felt like this last year's felt like an eternity.
Right. Yeah. There's a reason why this episode is called 60 Years of the Last Decade, because it has just felt like 60 years. Mm-hmm. So in the world of entertainment, when we talk about entertainment, we're going to specifically be talking about like television and movies. In the last decade, we saw the rise of streaming. Like, that's so weird to think about now.
When I think about having...
There was streaming.
When I think about having Netflix.
I had Netflix on my 360 at my apartment, and I had...
think really hard about what year that was.
I jury-rigged it where I could connect in using Windows, the Windows version of Windows I had to connect into their streaming library, and a fan had made a program that ran on the 360 where you could just run it and it worked. And then Netflix hired that guy to make their actual app and then put that out there for everybody.
Now think about what year that was, though, because that wasn't 2010.
That wasn't 2010.
That was more like 2013, probably.
No, that was prior to 2010.
No, it wasn't.
It totally was.
It wasn't. I guarantee you.
So, but let's not get semantic about this. We have a lot to talk about.
And I'm looking. Keep going. I'm looking this up now.
Go ahead.
But the rise of streaming, it's something that's such a daily part of our. It's such an ingrained thing into our culture that a movement happened that was called cord cutting. That's in the last decade. And I know I'm talking about it like I'm an old person making a documentary, but that's to put perspective on this. That was the last decade that things like Hulu streaming, Netflix streaming, fucking everything has a fucking streaming. My dog has a streaming platform now. It's become that. In fact, it's getting to the point where we're like, there's too many streaming packages out there. This is exactly why we stopped cable, stopped fucking doing this.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've got the big contenders, your Hulu. You've got Disney Plus now is a big contender. HBO Go.
HBO Go, and then Netflix, and that's pretty much it.
And this is something that we've seen over the last decade is these large TV shows coming out that have budgets that are larger than feature films.
Right. And when you remember, and because when I made my list of best TV shows of the decade, I very specifically didn't include Breaking Bad because it started in 2008.
And I do have a clarification on my thing.
You're fine. We'll get there.
That would have been 2009, so it means 2008 is when I would have been doing my initial streaming stuff with Netflix.
Your
weird hack experiment was the year before 2009. Right. So just slightly outside of this was the beginning of like the streaming shit. So like streaming really has only been around.
Well, but Netflix streaming didn't actually become popular with anybody for a long time. If you remember when Netflix streaming launched, it had nothing on it.
Yeah.
It was
one of the biggest things they got because they were partnered with Starz was like they could air Spartacus when it came out.
Yeah.
Because for all the 27 people that were watching that, Spartacus is a great fucking show, by the way. Watch all of it.
No, I remember back in the day. So one of the first like shows that they had air quotes all of was Doctor Who. Basically, they put all the Doctor Who DVDs they had on there because they had the streaming rights to it.
Yep.
But none of it was in the correct order. So fans had to go. You had to go to a special website to get the order that you can watch Doctor Who in. That's actually the chronological order to have it make sense. Because otherwise, you're just getting like, oh, this is the Cyberman DVD. It's just episodes about Cyberman, and you have no clue what the fuck is going on.
Think about the fact that streaming over the last decade has not only become a thing, but become such an important part of our lives, and that shows are being made on streaming platforms like The Handmaid's Tale that are like award-winning shows now.
Yeah, let's not forget. I mean, think about the
I consider Game of Thrones that.
Well, when you think,
Game of Thrones, it's a traditional cable channel, but for HBO, but HBO doesn't care about that anymore.
I think started. When did Game of Thrones started? It's on here in 2011, and we just barely had any kind of HBO streaming at that point, if any at all. I think it was tied to your cable account.
Something like that.
Yeah, you had to have it in a cable package in order to stream anything.
Yeah, when it first came out, it was like the first year or two. They're like, you got to have a cable package to get access to this thing.
Right.
And we're like, oh, shit. So, but that time, everybody still kind of had one. This is the reason we're talking about the death of cord, or the rise of cord cutting.
Yeah. When I think about the first really important in the news, like this is the thing that proves that streaming is legitimate, it's House of Cards. First season of House of Cards came out, and all of a sudden people were like, whoa, Netflix might show up at the Emmys. What's up with that?
Right.
Yeah, how do you these
storytelling? This is that good.
Yeah,
like,
these streaming shenanigans, and they made their own show like assholes. They didn't go through FX or ABC or NBC.
They didn't put it on our networks.
Yeah,
for us to hoard over and then not allow anybody else to have access to.
I remember reading articles about how House of Cards was the future of television. I remember them pointing out specifically that they didn't have to design the episodes around commercial breaks, and that the episodes didn't have a set length, and how much that would change TV. And it's 100% true now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're talking, in my opinion, I think that over the last decade, television in general hit kind of a new golden age.
Yeah.
You had shows that cost more than movies to make.
Oh, yeah.
You have higher quality content, much more smartly written shows that have been coming out. You've had writers and directors that are willing to not think the audience is stupid when they go to tell a story.
Correct.
Yeah, honestly, so I just finished the last episode of Watchmen, which
Is this week the last episode?
This last Sunday was
I'm going to watch it on Friday.
Was the last episode. And for me, feels like the culmination of 10 years of work. Damon Lindelof, if you follow his career and all the movies he's worked on, the television shows, and you see him being like, I'm going to make a show that's primarily going to be watched by streaming people about a comic book that hasn't been around for 30 years or more, and wasn't a very well-received movie, even though that movie cost a shitload of money to make.
Yep.
And we're going to continue down that storyline with DC, who bought the rights, and we're going to figure that out too. And then I watched it and went, holy shit. The level of nerddom that has come to fruition at this point is amazing. The fact that I'm watching this thing, and then I took a step back and I looked at it and was like, fuck, so I have Disney Plus with Mandalorian telling me amazing ass story, like Star Wars stories, and then I've got the Imagineering story on there telling me all this other shit that I love. Then I have Netflix releasing everything, like Sabrina and
Stranger Things,
which is just
Witcher's around the corner.
Yeah, and then
Witcher's comes out on Friday.
Yep.
And then I look back further and further, and I keep looking at these things. Most of the television's things that I've enjoyed, and even most of the movies, haven't been done through major outside of Marvel stuff, major studio stuff,
cable network television,
cable network television,
the ones with all the money
stuff. That is gone in my mind.
Yeah,
it is now all these other places where I've seen the rise of Stephen King again has been through not.
Yeah, it's been
ABC.
mostly through Netflix.
It's been through Netflix, and it's been through Hulu, and it's been through film, and it's been through these other places that want to take chances and tell more interesting stories, or tell stories that you couldn't get away with telling because you had to have, there might be a 10-year-old watching when their parents aren't looking, so you can't have these kind of things on there. And Netflix is like, fuck you, we're putting boobs in it. We don't give a shit.
Yeah, right? I can think of 3 off the top of my head right now, and this is me not being a Stephen King reader. I can think of 3 movies based on his books that came out on Netflix in the last decade that are exactly that. They're full budget.
In the last year.
Yeah, it's actually in the last year. I got an email today for Alamo Drafthouse asking me to go to the Stephen King premiere thing for Austin of the new show that's coming on HBO. Did you know Stephen King has a show based on one of his books coming on HBO? It happens in a week.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I was specifically thinking of 1882, Gerald's Game, and The Tall Grass. Those all came out in the last 3 or 4 years.
Okay, those actually came out in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, no, he co-wrote that.
That's true. In The Tall Grass with Joe Hill.
Right. Actually, those are in the last 2 years. But think about we've had Castle Hill in the last 2 or 3 years. Or sorry, Castle Rock. We had It 1 and 2. So
It 1 and 2 for sure.
Yeah, that's only been recently. And I feel like we're finally getting this point where we can tell Stephen. We had The Mist, the TV series.
Yeah,
also
we had
out.
The Mist.
We had that one Biodome TV show. I think
Under the Dome.
Under the Dome, which I watched half an episode and I gave it up. I didn't even get my 3 episodes. I was like, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
So obviously streaming, really big deal. I feel like in the last decade, one of the big things that we saw, which I never would have believed, is the CW became the go-to place for nerdy television.
One of the things I was just about to say is the last bastion of cable network television is kind of the CW right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously Shondaland, and that's a big deal, and there's the interminable dross that is the reality TV a conglomerate.
It's just an abysmal pit of reality TV.
Right.
5 good AMC
but
shows.
That being said, when you think about standard network cable television, it's mostly gone away in the last 10 years outside of things like the CW verse and every Shonda Rhimes TV show.
Right.
And Shonda Rhimes is on her way to Netflix.
Yep.
So all we have left
And the
really
CW
is superhero shit.
Outside of the U.S., the CW is streamed on Netflix.
Yeah.
Like they come out week to week on Netflix.
That's actually the reason why I love that contract that they have in the rest of the world, because I think it's fucking brilliant. I wish we would have that here. The CW shows, I wouldn't say it's been in the last 10 years, because they already had Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Fucking Supernatural it's now on its 17th season.
I don't know, it's like 75 years at this point of Supernatural.
I mean, I'm going to binge that entire season now while we're on our break, which by the way we'll be back January 6th. So people, you're listening to this, we're going to be on a break for a little bit because it's the holidays and I don't feel like doing shit.
And when we're back, me and Tony, we're going to make it weird.
Yeah, we're going to get real weird with it. In fact, that's going to be an episode title, I think.
Yeah. Let's get weird.
But no, it's CW's always kind of been that place for weird people to watch weird shows together.
It has, but
weird teens to watch shows together.
It grew.
It grew, and it's grown with us, and that's the great thing about the CW. It has evolved with us. Whereas my first show that I loved on that channel was Buffy,
right?
And has now moved on past that to where it took me a little bit to convince me. I was like, oh, Supernatural is way better than what I thought it was, and now I love Supernatural. And then they started doing all the DC stuff, and I'm like, oh shit. I wasn't on board for the Vampire Diaries times. I wasn't on board for some of the other weird things that they did.
Vampire Diaries had the unfortunate problem of coming out at the exact same time as True Blood.
And Twilight. It was this vampire science.
And I mean, Twilight is fine. Twilight's its own thing. It's on the big screen. But like, how are you gonna watch True Blood and then go watch the Vampire Diaries? Right? It's like I'm gonna like have a bunch of full on sex, and I'm gonna walk over here and someone's gonna pinch my nipple. Yeah,
just dry hump a little bit.
Yeah. They're like gonna tease me, and I'm already done because of all the True Blood, and I'm just like, I'm not into it. Could you just not? I feel like it's a shower.
The CW not only took a risk on the Arrowverse, which I believe really has fundamentally changed how we view superhero TV.
It has, and I feel like we owe a lot of that entire universe to Stephen Amell.
We really do.
Yeah. I feel like we had the Arrow, and the Arrow started strong, and the whole first couple of seasons were strong enough for them to say, all right, let's fucking do this, let's spin off. And when you see, even way back then, when you see interviews with Stephen Amell during the first season, second season, he's like, people really like this show. I really took it to heart, and I made sure, as like the top billed actor, that I was always professional, that I was always on time, that I was always in shape, that I was always clear and ready, and had my lines memorized. I set the standard.
He would read the old comic books so he'd better understand the character, the history of it. He's like, I am this character for a lot of people, and I have to hold up the idea of being that character.
Yeah, and it's
like Christopher Reeves with Superman all over again. You're like, you are the embodiment of this fucking character.
He took that responsibility so seriously, and I feel like it did more than we can say to launch this universe.
His fucking winery is named Knocking Point.
Yep.
Like, that's how into it he is. So yeah, CW just became this go-to place for nerdy-ass television. So we had our Supernaturals, we had all the Arrowverse. But then they took a chance at a little show called Riverdale.
Yeah.
Which basically on paper was like, all right, so Archie Comics, but Twin Peaks, go.
Yeah, and
you're like, what?
I remember I was
those of us that read the comics, as we talked about earlier, were like, yeah, that makes sense, because they went off the fucking rails.
Yeah,
and it was weird and fun and great. Everybody else was like, wait, what?
Yeah. I remember getting into Riverdale like in the weirdest way. It was because of me doing the show here with you guys, and y'all saying like Archie Comics, and me being like, Archie Comics, isn't that just like, like ice cream and burgers and shit? Like, wasn't that like 1950s Americana?
Hanging out at the chocolate shop and driving around.
Yeah, hanging out at the chocolate. Like
there's werewolves and vampires.
How at all is this relevant today? And you guys told me about Riverdale, and the first season was on Netflix, and I went home and watched it, and I've watched every episode since, probably more than once.
Yeah,
because it's awesome.
To the point where now Netflix has its own separate show with Sabrina. That's like, that's Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to where Sabrina the Teenage Witch, because it was the Melissa Joan Hart show, I watched every fucking week.
Of course.
And,
it was Melissa Joan Hart.
It was Melissa Joan Hart on fucking TGIF. It was fucking amazing. I love Crystal Explains It All.
Yeah.
And then she did this other show, and I was like, fuck yes, she's this witch teenager girl, and I don't know what the fuck's going on.
That show was cute as hell.
And it's all, by the way, that show is entirely on Hulu if you want to watch
absolutely.
that.
That's funny. I don't think it will hold up.
I've never seen it, but I did watch a few episodes of it recently just to try it out.
It probably does not hold up.
You got halfway through the first season.
Yeah, I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Also in this decade, Mad Max came back. Like,
yep. That's the thing that happened.
That's a thing that happened in the
last decade. Mad Max might be my movie of the decade.
Like, that movie, like Mad Max, like from the 80s, from the ashes of the 80s. came
from
back.
the ashes of Mad Max.
Well,
Right.
think about
By the time you get to that third
Right.
one, you're like, it's been iffy now.
yeah. Well, think about. I mean, we really only get this in video games, even these days. But a complete remake. It's not a remake. A complete succession of the franchise, often to a compelling story made by the original creator that somehow lives up to the expectations of, and then far, far surpasses everything you wanted about a title, about a property you already love. That just doesn't happen. It really doesn't. And if I could spend an hour of podcast talking about the genius of the people who created Mad Max Fury Road, I would spend that hour.
Yeah. It's
Honestly,
so
that makes
gorgeous.
complete sense. Like, I'm just thinking about like the history of entertainment media, of a case where something like that would happen. And I'm like, fuck, Sherlock is the closest you get to that. When you have like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle coming back to write more Sherlock stories after he'd killed him off because the fans were writing so much of the extra shit.
But there's no guarantee that that'll be any good. And we've seen a lot of that this decade
that's
too.
Is like we've seen so many times it went bad. The times it's been successful, you have to go back 100 years when it would actually work together.
Right. Let's not forget that in the last decade, we've seen both an attempted reboot of Rocky, which failed horribly.
It was actually really good, though.
No, the late Rocky movies were terrible. Rocky 6. Come
I'm
on.
talking about the ones where he's not Rocky. Or he is Rocky, but he's not boxing.
Creed.
That's
I'm talking about Creed.
what I was getting there.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, thank
That's
you.
the thing is, I thought you were talking about Creed. I'm like, no, Creed's
We have
good.
had both somebody try and create a movie with Rocky about Sylvester Stallone while he was in his late 60s, which was just nobody cared. And then we had
so far past a boxer's prime.
Yes, and then we had the director of Black Panther, which I'm sure we'll get to later, before he did Black Panther, make a movie about Apollo Creed's son that was every bit the Rocky movie that we got with Rocky 1 and Rocky 2. That was maybe even better than those movies because they had all the modern sensibilities of filmmaking and oneers and what we've seen in boxing movies since and before then to make it something much better than just another Rocky sequel.
Right. The Creed movies, like I'd forgotten that we had another Rocky movie because I just kind of wrote it away because it's like, oh, it was so awful. But then Creed,
I think it was just
out,
called Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, but the Creed came out just Creed, and I was like, holy shit, this movie's good.
Yep.
And then Creed 2 came out, and it was good.
It was
I don't
fine.
think it was as good, but it was good.
The first Creed was 2015, and damn, was it great.
This decade, horror made a comeback, in my opinion.
Oh, in a big way.
In a big way. And I do want to say, I do think it's in part due to diversity.
Oh, 100%.
We've got so many great non-white dude writers and directors for horror.
Let's start with the Babadook. That was like what, 2011, I think?
Something like that around that time. Jennifer Kent. Yep. Yeah. I mean, what Jordan Peele alone is doing right now.
Oh, man.
Between The Twilight Zone and just the few movies that he's put out, like, Get Out and Us, like, horror is in this renaissance right now. And it's
Hereditary, Quiet Place.
Right? These are all fantastic films that are getting exposure. Like, I went and saw The Babadook in New York at the IFC indie theater that fits 15 to 30 people in the fucking theater. And I remember going and seeing it and being like, I don't know if this is ever going to take off. Like, this is definitely a for me movie, but I don't know if it'll ever be popular.
Yeah.
And then it did. It went on streaming platforms.
My favorite
and then
part
became
about
popular.
the Babadook, though, is the accidental placement of Babadook in Netflix to where Babadook is now a gay pride film.
I love that.
I
that is
absolutely
fantastic.
love
Yeah,
it. And
that's one of my favorite details of
Babadook
horror.
is a gay icon now. It's the best thing in the world.
But I think that's
that's
really
awesome.
interesting, and that's one of the reasons why horror has become on the rise. Is we are going to be able, we are now able within our society to fund projects by people who've been previously marginalized and been pushed back on their ability because of who they are or their gender or their orientation or whatever. That weren't allowed to make films, but now you can start. We have these stories coming out from these creators. And like I said, we get those earlier in video games where we're getting these amazing, new, interesting, unique, weird stories. We're getting that same thing within filmmaking, but specifically within a horror, because it's a more interesting way to kind of tell those personal stories about these hardships, about these things that you're afraid of, about your journey, but, put, a guy with a knife involved.
Oh, yeah.
In it, and you can tell something that's crazier and deeper and darker and more fucked up and goes kind of like into that human psyche. And I think that that's why we've had this resurgence, especially within marginalized creators, to come forward and in the last 10 years make this become the thing that it's become. Yeah. And I'm super on board to keep making amazing ass weird horror movies.
Think about the final scene, and spoilers by the way, for Get Out.
Yeah.
The final scene in it is you see flashing police lights. And that entire scene plays out based completely on what how society treats black men that are out at night.
Yeah,
like that entire
especially
scene
in a rich white neighborhood,
played to subvert your expectations because you know what's going to happen when that's
it's not going to be good,
and you're like, this is not going to end well.
And think about what happened there, because in that scene, you come across that moment, you see the lights come on, and you're instantly like, oh, he's fucked, he's dead, and it's as if the police that you think are showing up are the horror monsters of the movie.
It's true.
Think about that. Think about how everyone in America's reaction to that scene was like, oh, God, the real horror is here.
Right.
It's the cops.
Yeah, it's pretty...
And then it's fucking, spoilers, friend steps out of the car and is like, dude, you okay?
Well, I mean, we were in a decade where we watched an entire town get lit on fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all that and all of these things that did come to play in the news, all the hatred that was coming out in the news and on television.
It's kind of reached its peak point, I think, right about now.
It really has, hopefully.
God. Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's finding its way into our horror.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's important that it does.
And it's important to note that, one of my favorite episodes of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee is actually with Chris Rock. And at the end of the episode, and these episodes are like 10, 15 minutes long, but at the end of the episode, they're in a very nice car, and they're probably driving a little too fast, and they get pulled over. And Jerry's just here talking to Chris Rock, and he's like, hey, a cop in the back, are you worried? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'd be more worried if you weren't here. But even with you here, I'm still worried.
Because he's at that point actually technically a black man driving in LA in a car that he doesn't own.
Yeah, and he's like,
which is like a terrifying idea.
Yeah,
and he's like, write a horror movie in like one sentence. There you fucking go.
Yeah, and Jerry says, but you're Chris Rock, and he goes, oh, Jerry.
Yeah, that's
you're white.
Yeah.
We got an Into the Spider-Verse movie this decade.
That I 100% agree deserves its own mention.
Of all the weird shit to happen.
The reason I love the Into the Spider-Verse mention is because I feel like this is a window into our future, into our next decade. I feel like we might have a very strong animation department coming out of Sony. That is willing to tell some, really great stories for anyone willing to lend them a property.
Right.
Because, DC has been doing animated stories based on their comic books for a long time.
And they've been killing it.
They've been telling great stories with great animation and making, like, Kevin Smith money.
Yeah.
But Spider-Verse made fucking blockbuster money. So
that's interesting that you talk specifically about animation coming from Sony on that. Because up until this point, you had, in the names of animation... in the Western world, you had Disney.
Yep.
And then recently, within our lifetime, DreamWorks came out, and that was an offshoot.
DreamWorks did some great stuff. I mean, Kung Fu Panda.
DreamWorks came out as an anger to deal with with Pixar and with Disney.
Correct.
It became its own separate thing. You have Pixar, which we will consider animation. It's 3D animation. You've got Studio Ghibli in the East, which I consider I'm talking about the premier best of people making animation.
Absolutely.
And then finally now you have Sony coming in and be like, we can also do animation stuff. Right. And I think that's going to start shaking things up a little bit. We've already seen over the last 10 years, Disney kind of almost coming into another renaissance of making their animated films. And it wouldn't be that way if we didn't have competition from places like Sony or in some cases DreamWorks. But I really think that that'll be a fun battleground to see who can kind of tell these fun, emotional, interesting, weird stories about their properties going forward, especially because the battle between Sony and Disney.
Yep.
So that's going to be kind of fun to tell. Like, is Sony's battle for the rights of Spider-Man going to exist in animation where they can control it? That's fucking cool, and I'm looking forward to that because Into the Spider-Verse with Miles Morales and everything. At first the trailer came out and I went, looks weird.
It did look weird.
See, and this goes
then
back,
watching, you're like, it makes sense why it looks weird.
Yeah.
there's a couple big risk factors that Into the Spider-Verse had.
Not Peter Parker.
Yeah, and not Peter Parker.
For number one,
Right.
you have to mention it's not Peter Parker in a
Right.
Spider-Man movie.
And again, we're going to play that diversity card.
Yep.
It's a black Spider-Man.
Yep.
And that, for some people who are horrible people, that's a turnoff.
Oh, sure.
And the fact that that's who
A
this
black
character was.
stormtrooper was a turnoff for those people.
It's true. That was a thing that fucking happened this decade. I
Yeah,
forgot
it
about
happened
that.
real hard. It's still happening.
Black people can put on white armor and kill everyone. I think that's a thing that's allowed.
And miss.
And miss a lot.
But yeah, I mean, it was a big risk. And also saying, like, hey, we're going to not make this your generic origin story.
Yeah.
We're going to throw everything into this movie.
Yeah, and also we're going
make it a
to
family.
invent and implement an entirely new and entirely untested animation style that is only really going to be relevant if people get it and are comic book and screen printing nerds.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
the stylization of the film is the one thing that when I said the first trailer I didn't get because I was like, oh, it looks weird.
Yeah.
And then you watch the movie, you go, oh, the stylization totally makes sense.
And imagine
if you like all
an
these
executive
things.
walking in and being like, "This looks weird. I don't like it," and
Yeah.
them having to be like,
Why don't they
"Hang
have
on."
big eyes and everything's smooth in
And
1980s?
then being like, "Hang on, pause. Oh wow, that looks like a comic book panel. Right, pause. Oh, that looks like a comic book panel. Right, pause. That looks like a fucking comic book panel. Yeah.
Now you're getting
Now do this literally anywhere in 210 minutes, and that's our movie.
So yeah, Spider-Verse came out this decade. Absolutely brilliant. Cannot wait for the next one. What else can we talk about? Nostalgia hitting full force. That was kind of a big thing.
Yeah, that was a big
with
thing.
shows like Stranger Things. We've also had remakes and reimaginings for better or worse.
Yeah, we've had we had Ghostbusters.
We have to mention
we
it,
have to
right?
mention that Ghostbusters came out in 2016 because we just got a new trailer for the ones coming out in the
Right.
next 10 years because that's
And
that's another 10
Right,
years.
and let's
from
not
now.
forget like, what falls neatly into the whole nostalgia thing is the current reign of Transformers movies.
It's true.
Those are actually
started
really
before.
going under
Yeah.
though. I mean, if you look at the history of them, we've now got like 7 of them.
Honestly, they make so much money that no one cares anymore. Those movies don't do badly. They do very well. It just no one
ones
reports
that
on
are,
it.
All right, so the ones that have been done by Michael Bay have done well. The
Yes.
ones that have not been directed by Michael Bay have actually not done as well.
They haven't done
which
as
is-
well.
They
That's
haven't
true.
done as well, which is why he came back to do the 6th one,
Mm-hmm.
and it did do better. But Michael Bay doesn't want to keep doing those.
No,
which
he's done.
Thankfully, he wants to go do other shit because he just had a movie come out on Netflix, which I'm weirdly going to watch because Ryan Reynolds.
Because
is in it.
Ryan,
It's literally I'm watching it because Ryan Reynolds is in it.
Yeah, and it's gonna be awesome. You know,
It's going to be
awesome.
awful Michael Bay explosion fest, but you know what? I have this weird kind of respect for Michael Bay because he understands things on a level that I just hate that he understands.
Yeah,
them.
no, it is like he like everyone talks about their lizard brain as they're like it just makes me do things, and he's like it makes you do that because of this. That's how lizard brains work. And
No,
I'm
but he
gonna
doesn't
make
quite
this
understand
movie.
how lizard brain works either because like it
make-
it works because I know in my head it works, but I can't tell you why it works.
No, he can tell you why it works. There's dissertation upon dissertation about why it works in his
from
film
other
school
people.
papers.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, we've got the full nostalgia thing going on. We have Stranger Things. We're going back to the '80s a lot right now.
Oh, yeah.
and that's just
It's
kind
because
of
our generation is the primary one. We're the ones making babies, so you have to appeal to the people making babies before you appeal to those babies.
Yeah.
Right, and I mean, even Cyberpunk coming out next year could be considered a bit of a nostalgia kick.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Cyberpunk in its creation, I wouldn't say it's a nostalgia kick. It's finally coming to fruition
That's a good way to put it.
because this is something that's been around our entire lives. We
Yeah.
weren't part of Cyberpunk whenever it was popular in the 80s.
Oh, God,
Those are
no.
people
I was-
at our age in the 80s who are
Right.
like,
Yeah.
we like one weird thing and no one else likes
Yeah,
it.
no, I was in diapers when that shit came out.
So us, it seems nostalgic because it did exist, but
Mm-hmm.
it's actually finally becoming, and weirdly, actually becoming true in a lot of cases from like Philip K. Dick's work when you're like, he just wrote the future.
Yeah, yeah.
Why don't we take this a couple minutes here? Hector, why don't you name off some of the movies and things that
All right,
you...
I'm going to do my best to keep the list brief. I'll only name the stuff I consider important rather than the things I think everyone should watch. The first one I'll give a little bit of an explanation for, but I won't do this much. I named Bridesmaids 2011 because it kind of really did change the way
Paul
comedy...
Feig, right?
Bridesmaids?
Yeah.
No, I want to say that's an Apatow movie.
I need to check because I was like, Paul Feig got it like in the last 10 years, got his like super rise.
Right. I'm not 100% on that, but it really did. Whoever made it really did change the way we think about women in comedy movies, like entirely from the ground up. That it was the rise of a lot of the great comedy actresses that we see now, just all in one movie. So that really affected comedy from there. Let's see, Gone Girl 2014, David Fincher's like fucking opus. Let me see here. 12 Years a Slave. Very, very great.
It's Paul
movie.
Feig.
Very important. Was it Paul Feig?
Yeah, it's Paul Feig.
Okay.
I mean, it makes sense because Paul Feig writes very great like female characters that tell dick and fart jokes.
Yeah. Inside Out.
Yeah.
Oh God, that was literally an emotional journey.
Yeah. For me, this is a big one. 2011 is Drive.
Okay.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that movie, definitely watch it. Let's see here.
It's not for everybody. It's people who like arts films and also racing films.
I think anyone will enjoy that movie if they watch it. I really do.
I feel like a lot of people won't because I love Drive. I just don't see. Like, I know people that would never see the appeal of that.
Tony thinks he's smarter than everyone. Arrival was a big one for me. Amy Adams, aliens show up. They're kind of octopusy. It
was amazing. No, it was amazing. It's the reason why I'm looking forward to Dune. This is the motherfucker that did Blade Runner 2049.
Yes. Okay.
So he did Arrival and then Blade Runner 2049, and now he's doing Dune and just won Director of the fucking Decade award by whatever thing I just read.
Correct. Yes.
Like literally all of his movies are the best.
Let's see. Moonrise Kingdom may be one of my favorite movies of the decade.
God, I love that movie so much.
Might be my favorite movie
that was in the last
decade.
10 years.
That's 2012.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see. Probably my favorite movie of 2019 was Parasite.
Okay.
Speaking of good horror that came out this decade, The Green Room.
Okay.
Green
was actually.
I love the Green Room because it's a horror movie just entirely based on real life. When you're watching it, you get kind of like that visceral like almost nearly gore porn aspect of it.
Yeah.
But you're telling a story that you could quickly. It's easily identifiable on
really
both sides.
Yeah, and the whole
what's
like
going on.
The whole like Pacific Northwest like grunge like backwoods setting in the like giant woods with a whole bunch of farmers and hicks and rednecks out there.
I don't know, for me,
I got that.
Yeah, so you got that part. I got the going to a little shitty punk rock dive that you've never been to before.
Oh, and just
you show
realizing
up and going,
you shouldn't be there.
This is full of fucking Nazis.
Yep.
We need to not be here.
Yep.
Like that was the reason why I was like, the moment I realized that movie was like, I lived part of this and I don't like where this is going.
So if I had to pick my favorite Tarantino movie of the decade, I think I'd have to go with Django Unchained over Hateful Eight or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I go with Hateful Eight.
Even though both of those are wonderful movies that I love,
The fact that he made 3 movies in the last 10 years.
Yeah, Django Unchained 2012, probably my favorite of those. Whiplash, I thought was an incredible movie.
Oh, that movie was so good. I hate jazz, and the movie's fucking good.
Yeah, right along that train of great award-winning movies, Birdman. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Again, I hate jazz, and that movie's fucking good.
Let's see, The Wolf of Wall Street. Scorsese, I feel like maybe one of his last really great Scorsese.
That was the end of Scorsese in my mind. Everything he did the Irishman recently, and I was like, you're already done. Mm-hmm. Like you told the most over-the-top capitalistic story you possibly could with Wolf of Wall Street. You were literally done now.
Yeah. Another great Wes Anderson movie, The Grand Budapest Hotel.
Absolutely fantastic.
2014.
I like that way more than Moonrise Kingdom.
I love Moonrise Kingdom more.
Moonrise and he has so many great movies, but Moonrise Kingdom is my favorite.
So I was talking.
Moonrise has like no place in my heart whatsoever.
Oh God, it is my entire heart. So the entire time, I feel like the Grinch and like the box is too big for my heart that is bursting.
Yeah, I was talking about Moonrise Kingdom actually really recently with somebody, and I was talking about how it really encaptures the awkwardness of young attraction.
Indeed.
When you don't understand like how your body works,
Yeah.
or anything, like, the awkwardness shows through in the movie.
These people
Like,
know
everybody-
that they are bonded in a way that is special, and they
Right.
know that they have feelings for each other, and it's not even remotely sexual. It's more that just these people know that they are partners, now,
Right.
and that they should be together. And it all happened through letters that they wrote to each other.
Yeah.
And there's something so incredibly pure about that. And that's how I would describe the entire movie, is how incredibly unassuming and pure, and God, the movie just feels incredible.
It encapsulates what it is to be that age and have those feelings.
It really does.
In a way that I don't think any movie has ever done before.
Yeah, agreed. Continuing down the list, we talked about Deadpool. That's one to mention. Interstellar, 2014.
Okay.
As we continued our love affair with Nolan.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan, from doing the Batman movies. Avengers 2012.
Right. So why don't we really?
Do you want to do the MCU?
let's-
So that's kind of like the ending point in my mind for the show, at least, is that's where we would stop.
Okay.
this
Well,
decade
we can.
on.
We if you want, we can circle back to the MCU at the end.
Yeah.
So let's do that.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention that one because it was early in the decade. Let's see here. Scott Pilgrim versus the World was 2010.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
God damn it.
And I fucking love that movie. I know you have it on your list over there, but John Wick.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. The entire John Wick trilogy. John Wick 1 came out in 2014 and was one of the coolest movies I've ever seen. Let's see. Snowpiercer. By the same director who just did Parasite, which
Right.
is my favorite movie of this year.
So let's kind of talk about just a couple
I've
more
got-
items before we jump into Marvel stuff.
Right. I've got one or two more before we finish that won't be Marvel but are important. Logan, 2017.
Yep.
Yeah,
very
that
important.
one easy to forget. The Shape of Water.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that
happened to
2017, along with Blade Runner 2049, which you recently saw.
I did.
And you loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just adored it.
And I'm going to mention this. Okay, well, Ex Machina, amazing movie.
On my to-do list.
Yeah.
Ex Machina is amazing. I'm sorry, I was grabbing a drink. I was also going to say Guillermo del Toro. Both of his films this decade were fucking amazing. He's one of the best directors to ever exist and one of the best storytellers.
Agreed. Wait a minute. Pacific Rim, the first one came out in this decade.
I did it as well.
I think so,
I was
yeah.
going to say I know
because
that
I lived in Austin and I moved to Austin in 2010 in January.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that means so 3. I love Pacific Rim. It got an awful sequel. You had Shape of Water and the one that takes place in the Victorian mansion,
Crimson Peak.
Crimson Peak.
Yes. Okay, just to give it a quick mention before we start the MCU, Black Panther, I feel like might need to be mentioned. We're going to mention it again when we talk about the MCU, but Black Panther as kind of was a cultural shift, I feel like, for us.
It was.
It was the first Marvel movie to break $1 billion. As far as I know. No, wait, that's not true. I think the Avengers movies had broken that before, but it was the first non-Avengers Marvel movie to break $1 billion.
A singular character film.
Correct. It was culturally relevant. It hit at the perfect time, and it was so good.
And a lot of people said there's no way you can make a Black Panther movie work.
Exactly. And it really just
No, you told me 10 years ago
yeah.
Black Panther's getting a good movie and be like, really?
Yeah,
It's Black Panther.
If you
He's
told me
kinda-
in 2015, I'd have been like,
he's
nah.
like the king of a country and he's a bit of a dick.
Right. So that's my movies for the year
no, we're respecting
outside of the MCU.
So it's worth mentioning here as we talk about the decade kind of in review that, of course, we said that DC has been killing it in the animated film market.
Yep.
But Marvel really made the decade, whereas DC kind of stumbled. You know, when it came to
man.
film,
Yeah.
DC just couldn't do
Multiple injuries.
multiple times in the last decade, really trying to make it in film and television. It just wouldn't work. You know, they had the CW down. That worked.
Yeah, they got the TV universe
Small
rolling.
stories.
Yeah.
They were very good at telling small stories, but not larger tales.
Right. But then you cannot talk about this decade without just saying this is maybe the decade of Marvel.
It really is. I mean, we only have maybe one or two Marvel movies outside of 2010.
No, I'm serious. It's the decade of Disney. They
is.
bought Lucasfilms, brought Star Wars back, and in my opinion, brought Star Wars back.
So
Yeah.
they brought Star Wars back, but
they
Star Wars
bought
is-
Marvel.
Star Wars is
and-
decisive. People aren't decisive over Marvel movies.
See,
It's
the thing
just
is,
like
it's reason it's
you know
Disney's
what never
influence
had
and
any
money.
controversy outside of like the way underground of like Nazi assholes is every Marvel movie. The only people who complain about Marvel movies are people who hate the Black Panther as a
And the only people that complain about Star Wars movies are people who like
hate women as a concept,
but also love Star Wars. No, what I mean by that, by the Disney decade, is it was in 2012 they bought Marvel, and Marvel had already produced Iron Man 1 and
2012 is
Iron
when
Man
the
2.
first Avengers game came out. Avengers came out.
Yeah, that was.
So we already had Iron Man 1 and 2, we already had Thor, and we already had Captain America.
Yeah, and those were all produced by Disney. They're the ones that were the releasing agent.
But they were all Marvel Studios.
But they were all Marvel Studios by itself.
Yes.
And then they bought Marvel Studios, or bought Marvel, and they brought them into the fold to help create this larger empire between the... Also in the last 10 years, the acquisition of LucasArts, the acquisition of Marvel Studios and Pixar, the combination of all these things and how far they've grown, and how... Think about all of those four entities and how much money those individually make and how influential those were. We had multiples of every single one of those on our lists of things that were the best of these last 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why I'm just counting down to this is Disney's decade. It's not just Marvel. It's not just anything. It's this giant. It's the bigger company above them that's the one that's winning.
But I think
the more that I imagine. The more that I watch that Imagineering documentary, the more I think every decade since it started has been the decade of Disney.
I just feel like when we go back
you get into the Disney bubble and you start believing that everything is created because of them.
Yeah.
I think that when you go back and you look at this decade 10 years from now and you talk about film, the one thing that they're going to say is it was the decade where Marvel ruled. It was... MCU was coming into its own, really. It had just kind of kicked off in the decade before, but it came into its own in this decade and had a full story arc that played out and basically wrapped up the decade.
Yeah, and let's be honest.
Well, not
that
all
story,
22 films were in those 10 years.
No. Let's be
a
honest.
lot of them were.
That story started. That big wrap up started with Avengers in 2012.
Right.
Before that, the only cohesive story we had was getting to Avengers.
Right.
There was no that. Nobody in their wildest dreams would have thought we're going to do Thanos.
As somebody who was a Thanos fan as a child, I never would. You would have been like, Thanos is going to be the main villain in the Avengers, and I'd be like, haha, you're funny.
You're like,
No,
he's not.
who else is going to show up? The Guardians of the Galaxy? That's dumb.
Right.
What are they going to do? Throw an Ant-Man? Nobody has time for that shit.
Right, like, give me some, what, you're going to put Hawkeye as a main character in a fucking Avengers? No.
Oh yeah,
come
and he's
on.
gonna have a lot of good lines with Doctor
Wait,
Strange.
this is kind of weird because like we're looking at this from the people who like the comic books but understand that the comic books would be traditionally considered unfilmable.
Oh, yeah.
When you look at the comic books as a whole, if you look at a lot of these stories, it hasn't been until the last 10 years that technology's
If you
gotten
had told
to
me
the point.
Iron Man was going to be an interesting main character, I'd been like, what?
Yeah, no.
Okay, the only reason Iron Man's interesting main character is because it's Robert Downey Jr.
the thing that sold me
Outside of
entirely.
that,
But that's
It's
what
shit.
they do well, though. They cast so well.
so that's Seraphim.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I remember having this conversation with you at a bar because they had just cast Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, and a bunch of people were like, "What? Why did they do that?" And I'm like, "Have you seen like any of his movies in the last 5 years? Did you watch Kiss Kiss Bang Bang? Like he's totally
Tony
gonna fucking do this."
Yep.
And then now we're finally seeing like it's the power of the casting for all of these films and the way it worked together. And I think that honestly, the Marvel films is the one thing that I look forward to for the next 10 years because I know we're gonna get some weird, fun, interesting shit.
Yeah.
We're getting that movie that I can't remember the name of because it's got like 17 fucking names in it. You got the Doctor Strange one, which also has like 17 fucking names in it. The next 10 years has got some amazing shit lined up
Yeah.
on the
We know the
next year and a half.
We know the
has some amazing
Fantastic Four is going to be right around the corner.
Yeah.
We know the X-Men are going to show up at some point.
Yeah, I had this funny thought the other day where I felt like coming into the end of the decade, I feel like we really did finish the MCU. Like it was a project and we did it. Champagne bottles and streamers and like blower, the party horns, whatever.
I, in fact, waited. I didn't even see Spider-Man in the theaters.
Yeah,
Because
noisemakers.
I got to the end of, Endgame, and I was like, we
think
we
we're
did it,
good.
bros. Like,
Yeah.
we made it to the end.
But the more, and I do feel like the MCU is done. But I I know that it's not.
But it's not.
And I know
It's
that
just starting.
I can't wait to see what the MCU brings me in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
No, and there's some amazing things lined up, and that's the way I look at across the board for a lot of what nerd fandom is for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the fact that like this week when this episode airs, I'll be going to see the final in this story of the Skywalker
The final
journey.
movie in the third trilogy of Star Wars movies.
Yeah. That is coming to a culmination. I get to go see that,
I mean, that
in a matter of days.
Star Wars is something that happened in this decade, man.
Yeah.
The rise again of Star Wars.
Yeah.
The fact that we have
The Rise of the Skywalker.
that we have a Star Wars show on a streaming site that everybody literally can't shut the fuck up about.
It's literally Sergio Leone made Star Wars, and you went like, "Why would that work?" And you're like, "Just watch it." And you go, "Holy fuck, this totally
Wait,
works.
what do you? What
this
what,
thing fucks."
Star Wars was already a western. Why do we need more? Oh yeah, no, I needed this. I needed
Actual
this.
western.
I needed that shrimp bot with the blue shrimp. I needed all of this.
You're just
Fucking
like,
shrimp bot was so weird, and blue shrimp. I know, even though they could like possibly exist in real life,
I'm into
just
it.
kind of creeped me out a bit.
The shrimp are creepy in general.
but I think that the Star Wars, again, very kind of divisive over whether or not you prefer the movies.
Correct.
But when you look at the Marvel universe, like, there's very few bad entries that came out over the last decade. And I think that that's why this decade will be remembered in film as the one for Marvel.
Were there moments where I was like, and it pulled me out of it? Yes.
Sure. Yeah,
But the moments where
Thor
I was
1
on
and
the
2.
edge of my seat. See, I disagree. I love Thor 1 and 2. I
Yikes,
know that they're
dude.
not good, but I love the character and the journey of Thor, and he wouldn't be where he was if he had not gone through those journeys.
That is true.
And it's the
But
thing.
I feel like he did all of his character growth in the non-Thor movies.
But even like Marvel's TV did well. We had full
Okay,
Netflix.
if we're getting into TV, the entire rise and fall of the Netflix Marvel universe happened this decade.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we have
some of the best.
We got Daredevil, and we got some incredible
TV.
Daredevil. We got Jessica Jones, and probably the only way she'll ever be portrayed. I feel like
She would never work in the movies.
Kristen Ritter nailed Jessica Jones in a way that, like...
She is Jessica Jones.
Yeah, Heath Ledger nailed the Joker, and that J.K. Simmons nailed J. Jonah Jameson. Like, I don't think anyone else is going to be able to do that anytime soon.
It's absolutely
Honestly,
true.
like, so we know we're getting new, like, more Spider-Mans are going to have J. Jonah Jameson in them.
Yeah, but it's just J.K. Simmons.
But I don't remember if they've cast him or not, because I can't remember off the top of my head. In my mind, you can only ever cast him. He gets to be the one force that he... All right, so my Spider-Verse theory is J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson exists in all universes.
That's
in
the
all
thing.
in all the Spider-Man universes, it's just him
He's
being
the
that one
Harrison
character.
Wells of the Marvel universe. He's always
He's
J. Jonah Jameson.
And if he's not, I'm not going to enjoy it.
Well, let's not forget that we had between the dance off to between the
Spider-Man 3?
between the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans
Yeah.
and the Marvel Spider-Mans. We had two Spider-Mans in there
man,
that
we
absolutely refused to cast J. Jonah Jameson
Yeah.
because if they couldn't get J.K. Simmons, what was the point?
You're like, fuck, they cast the perfect J.
All
Jonah
we're going to
Jameson.
do by casting this character is make everyone mad. I'm
So
mad
you-
thinking about it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, imagine like those movies. I like
Yeah.
them, but imagine somebody else being J. Jonah Jameson. Like, you add that character in those movies
No.
at all, and you're
No.
like, no.
No, it's so good to the point where when he shows up at, in Far From Home, I'm like, like, I was happier about that than
anything
I
else.
think I was about anything else in the movie, and it was a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they did Mysterio so well. Oh my god, I take it.
I think
The fact
that
we got a movie about Mysterio.
Yeah, and that they fucking nailed Mysterio too.
That was the
They
weird.
could have really fucked up
they got fucking
Mysterio.
Jake Gyllenhaal to play Mysterio,
Yeah,
man.
and you know what? He was super good at it.
10 years ago, hey, remember Jarhead? He's going to play Mysterio in a Spider-Man movie, and you're going to go, wow, that's going to be awful. Why the fuck is Sam Raimi doing that?
Right? I think that it's safe to say, of all the things that we've talked about just over the course of the show, that it was a good decade for nerdy shit for the most part.
Yeah, it was.
Comic books were amazing. Hands down, probably some of the best comic books we've had coming out since the original golden age of comic books. That we're getting to this point where new generation. It's been around for 100 years. We got a new generation of people coming in to write and draw and create new comic books. And video games have finally entered that golden age that they can tell these new unique stories and tell them. I think we're video games have never been in a state where they can look forward to the future as they have been right now.
That's true. And something I don't think I said during the comic books portion was when we talk about like the Marvel movies getting people like to go and look at comics, I feel like that is what did it. But that the comic book industry was full ready to take advantage of it. Because it's one thing to be like, oh, I liked that Captain America movie. Let me go look for Captain America comics.
We have 70 years of Captain America.
Right. But nobody wants 70 years of Captain. I don't want 70 years of Captain America
comics. Too much
Get that
Captain
shit
America.
away from me. I don't have time for that. But if I walk into a comic store and I look, oh, here's all the Captain America stuff. Oh, I'm a young girl. Who's Miss Marvel? Oh, what's a squirrel girl? Oh, wait, what's Saga? This is like some aliens having babies? And here we go.
Yes, Saga's alien having babies.
All of a sudden, like, you have these people walking into comic book stores and going, there are so many great stories in here. I'm going to become a comic book reader.
Yeah, and
Nice.
we
Yes,
haven't even mentioned the
exactly.
fact.
That's so
And
good.
they took,
so good.
and the comic book industry was like, "Oh, you want more shit? Oh my god, let's
We
take
have
some,
70 years of
Let's
Captain
take some
America."
risks. Let's publish this comic
Well-
about like Riverdale, but there are werewolves.
But
do everything.
the entertainment medium took risks on things like filming something like The Boys or
Oh,
Preacher. These
Or
In
are
fact, the Boys is one of my favorite comic books. I think that went
Yeah.
out of print in this 10 years.
Yeah.
And then somehow got a series on Amazon that I'm still not sure how actually got made because I love that series and no one should.
you
Right.
want to? No, it's an incredible series.
You're
and
like,
it's
this
fucking,
is basically unfilmable.
Yeah, no,
but it's the
I
same-
read that comic went,
Yeah.
you can't film this.
Yeah, and it's the same with The Preacher. And honestly, The Umbrella Academy wasn't far off from that either. And everyone forgot about The Umbrella Academy, even though it was awesome.
We're getting a second
And
season pretty soon.
did it come
Ish.
out this year? I don't
I
even
think
know.
it came out. Yes,
I
maybe.
think it came out this year.
A lot of things have happened in the last, let's say in the last 3
Right.
years, a lot of things have
Yeah.
happened, and we don't know how to keep track.
Before we wrap up, can I mention some TV shows?
Sure, not
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll try and go quickly through them. Me and James like this one, Legion.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah, that more superhero stuff.
I'm gonna give it another try. It's all done now, right?
Yes, it's done.
I'm gonna give it one last try.
Okay.
No one bother me for that fucking week.
I promise.
And I'm gonna give it this year. I'll give it one more try.
Okay, Glow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
good.
I mean, I knew the story. I knew that I knew some of the story about the gorgeous ladies of wrestling.
Right.
But now that I'm getting it, like this is the story, and you're
Yeah.
like, "Fuck, this is amazing."
Yeah, I knew nothing about it until I watched the show, and I think I binged watched the first season of Glow in one sitting.
Yeah, you
and
just
then
didn't
there was
see off the couch,
and then
yeah.
there was a documentary about the original
Yep.
Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, and I sat through all that too. Hannibal might be one of my favorite TV
God,
shows
fucking Hannibal.
of the decade. 2013
Yes.
is when it started. That's what made me fall in love with Mads Mikkelsen. I would wife him today.
Oh, yeah.
Love Mads
Absolutely.
Mikkelsen. Let's see. Bob's Burgers. Yeah,
It's a
that
thing
started in 2011.
It is one of the best written
Yeah.
shows. It is unfortunately one of the worst animated shows.
And that's on purpose, and they do that for...
I know. And
Yeah.
I can listen to the show. I just can't watch it.
We talked about Stranger Things, The Good Place.
Oh, yes.
Good Place is actually, I would consider The Good Place probably my number one show of the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It is so well written and so well acted and tells a story on a primetime television over the air channel
Yeah.
that would have never been
Yeah,
shown.
it was such a weird concept that probably no one was on board with.
I
like,
might
this would have been like a YouTube series
Yeah.
5 years ago.
I might have to say that The Expanse is my show of the decade.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Expanse is
I've just started The
100%
Expanse.
up there.
So like, I'm going to get there eventually.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read your silly books.
I couldn't talk about Breaking Bad because it started in 2008, but Better Call Saul has been very
true,
good.
yeah.
Great show. I put this one on the list, one, because I like it, but two, because I can't believe it started this decade. Justified started in 2010.
Justified started in 2010?
2010.
I feel like that show started in 2002.
Me too. Me too.
It only went for like 2006. Like I feel like that show existed before us, and people
Yeah.
just found the DVDs and put them on TV.
There's one that I'm leaving for the end, so I'm passing it. But The Deuce came out this year.
Oh my god, the Deuce!
Great show.
It's over
We
now.
didn't-
By the
we
way,
didn't- we haven't even mentioned the fact that Lucifer got a TV show.
Lucifer
Yeah.
got a TV show, and it ran for 3 seasons, and a fourth on Netflix, and it's getting a fifth.
It's having a fifth. like in the next year on Netflix.
That's something that's specific to this decade, by the way. Think about this. That we have TV series that have gone under and have found new homes in other places.
That's true. The Expanse is an example. I mean, there are a bunch of other ones.
Yeah, but
I
I mean,
just bouncing
Lucifer was a
around.
big
Like
one.
we talked a bit about the streaming stuff, but look at like truly some of the best streaming stuff. We have Amazon with The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is hands down one of the best television shows to ever exist. It's the culmination of what I Love Lucy was in the 1950s. You can see where that influence wears, and that's how far we've come to tell these types of stories. It's amazing that we can do this, and it's thanks to streaming TV.
Yeah,
which gives us the same thing as all those bad children's shows.
Absolutely. Let's see here. True Detective season 1.
Yeah.
Was a cultural event. Speaking of more streaming shows, Master of None.
Orange is the New Black.
Yeah, Orange is the New Black definitely goes on there. Fargo. I feel like not enough people watched Fargo.
It's on my to-do list.
Holy fuck, it is. It's the same guy who made Legion, so it's exactly as mindfucky, but it's just wall-to-wall incredible actors doing like the stuff from the Coen Brothers Fargo movie.
I was gonna say, it's the Fargo, the TV series, is the fucked up Legion, but by the Coen brothers.
Yes, pretty much. Fargo, I can't recommend it enough. If you've not watched it, 100% watch that show. Every episode of every season deserves your attention. The Handmaid's Tale you already mentioned, but that's a phenomenon that started this year. Speaking of more streaming shows, Dear White People is pretty
I watched
important.
the movie and I've yet to get down to watch the series.
I like the
because
series
I love
better.
the movie. I thought the movie was great, but I just okay, how much... Where does the story go past that? And so it's one of my it's my back burner show. Like, one day I'm gonna sit down and watch fucking all of it.
Yeah.
Because I love that movie.
To move on, let's see here. BoJack Horseman joined the ranks of all of the really incredible animation we've had over the last decade. I know it by far didn't start this decade, but South Park has been going strong for a long time, and definitely this last 10 years, if not specifically in the last 2 or 3 years. But there's been a lot of great animation. Rick and Morty goes on this list. Bob's Burgers also started. There's been a lot of great animation, but I think BoJack Horseman really... kind of tapped into
I think in the
something.
last decade, what we've been seeing in terms of animation is that more people were figuring out how to make "quote unquote" adult animation without it being tits and dicks.
Agreed.
Well, no, it's what I said earlier. It's the people that have been marginalized by traditional media outlets are finally now able to tell their stories, to tell those unique things.
Yeah.
So you get Steven Universe. You get these new cool stories. You get things like I don't know, the guy has a dog with a friend. He says it's math magical. I don't know what the fuck that show was called, but you get things like
Adventure
that.
Time.
Yeah, Adventure Time. You get these
Adventure
new, interesting, unique stories told by people that wouldn't normally be part of the traditional market. And it pushes the boundaries of the types of stories you can tell and the types of characters you can have involved.
Right. And so the last few are almost entirely HBO, except for one, Penny Dreadful, that ended.
I forgot that was a thing that happened. This
Started
decade.
It was Showtime, wasn't it? Or was it?
Yes.
Showtime.
Started and ended this decade, and I felt like great the entire way through. Great actors, great
It
stories.
was we have to talk about like the failed idea that was the Universal horror monster movies.
Oh, the Dark Universe.
Yeah, the Dark
that
Universe.
started and ended with basically
with
one movie.
Yeah, and it was so fucking bad because don't cast Tom Cruise to do anything. And
Tom Cruise. We'll talk about Tom Cruise later.
yes, that's its own separate show. But either way, the better version of the Dark Universe was already made Penny Dreadful, and we're like, yeah we've already got that. Why the fuck would I want the shitty Universal version?
And I would honestly rather have a Dark Universe in like
Penny
long
Dreadful.
form TV rather than anything else.
Yeah.
But so to continue with HBO's excellence, Westworld started this decade. It hasn't ended yet.
Which it's weird that is something that is successful because was Michael Crichton. It's his original story that he directed the film version of, and it's not very good. It was a cute
product
idea.
of its time.
It was a cute idea, like robots are the future and they're terrifying. And Westworld, the TV show, is that no, humanity's fucking weird.
Yeah. We're all weird, and we would all love this, and we're gross for wanting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watchmen goes on this list because it's some of the best TV I've seen this decade. Chernobyl is a miniseries that every human being on Earth should watch. And I don't mean to mention this one last. None of these are in any particular order, and it probably hasn't aged particularly well. But when the Newsroom was coming out, it was easily the best show on television. It was Aaron Sorkin doing this like Spirit to Escalier. Like, what if we really nailed the news when it was coming out? And every episode of that show felt like, fuck, if only we could have a news outlet that did this.
Yeah, no, that's the moment I watched that show, the first 5 minutes was like, this needs to be broadcast to everyone right now.
Everyone needs to know that news can be this good and should be this good.
One of the ones you left down there was Silicon Valley. It's over now. It's done. So it's wrapped up its entire run within this decade. And it is one of the funniest shows I've seen for a live action just comedy put on by a relatively small group of actors. And it's just, it played very well with something I could associate with. And I applaud HBO for giving a chance to Mike Judge be like, I'm going to tell a show about computer programmers being weird and socially awkward. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, you're like, that's a weird, dumb story that no one's going to like. But the characters were so identifiable. You knew these people. You were these people. And it told this great story that I still appreciate. That I don't think we're going to get that for another maybe 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Something that tells that kind of emotional nerd journey of people who feel that weird outsiderness, that love, I like my fucking computer, please let me just leave me the fuck alone.
Well, really what it did,
attitude,
and I'm not trying to create an us versus them mentality, but we all work within the tech sector.
Yeah.
It provided people that are not in what we do a window into what we do in a very funny and easily digestible way.
That's the way I felt about Big Bang Theory. While it was definitely not the best at explaining who these people were or explaining nerd culture.
Right.
And it definitely turned into the who's in a relationship with who towards its end.
Right.
At its core, when it started, it was a show that was meant to expand people's ideas of what nerd culture was.
Right. If we
And
can
what smart people wanted to try and convey. Like, hey, yeah, we're smart and we can't tell you exactly how things work because our brains are wired a little bit differently.
Right.
And that's what I enjoyed about that show to begin with.
The Big Bang Theory felt like to me what Family Matters felt like to me way back in the day. Here's what may be controversial to some, but we should all just go ahead and get along with and maybe really learn something from, is a sitcom about a black family. And the father's a cop and it's a slice of Americana because really people are just people, and let's look at their lives. And when you look at the Big Bang Theory, as much as I absolutely detest that show, it really did expose a lot of people to people like me, and it made a lot of people like my mom and her sisters more aware that we're just people,
right?
We're just
who
people
like
who are
things,
weird and they're identifiable. My parents who've never been around an astrophysicist their entire fucking life are like, I get that kid.
Yeah, that kid, he's just got real human problems like real humans.
Okay, so we need to wind down. We've been running a bit long. This is our decade blowout. It's the last episode of this year.
I'm sorry if we made it feel like it was 10 years long in this episode.
Right. So, final thoughts on the nerdy decade that we've had.
I'll start. It's only, it's, if we could call it the decade of the nerd. I can't think of a single place where we were marginalized or brought down this decade. Everything has been about us and catered to us. All the really big stuff. I have considered more things in media, entertainment, comic books, movies, television.
We haven't even mentioned the fact
video
that D&D
games
came back.
Yeah, D&D. Holy shit. Stranger Things is practically about D&D. I feel like more people have been exposed to this and gotten into this and validated my life choices as a human all decade long, and I don't see it going away. I feel like people are more ready to share the joy with them being really, really, really into something.
Yeah.
And not feel like a pariah because maybe there aren't a lot of people out there like them. If we really have exposed that everyone is a nerd, it's not one of those situations where if everyone's special, no one is. It's more like if you really like a thing, a lot of people really like a thing, and maybe you should go and find them.
Mm-hmm. Tony, what about you?
I think that the last 10 years has been a crazy, wild ride exploring all different facets of nerd culture. The comic books, video games, just books themselves, not like novellas, the rise of Reddits and creating these individual stories that we can talk to each other, to these giant blockbuster films of the Marvel universe and Star Wars. It has been a crazy wild ride that I am glad to have been here for. And I'm looking forward to how we can continue going down that path. I think that when I was a child, I never imagined a world where the things that I liked were this prolific and enjoyed by this many people. I felt marginalized when I was a kid, that if I didn't like baseball and football, I wasn't going to be a normal person. And now I can look at the last 10 years and go, nah, I'm pretty fucking normal. The rest of you are kind of weird. And I think that that's what I'm looking forward to in the future, is that those of us that think differently, that act differently, that are different people, are now having a voice, having a multiple platforms to explore themselves and get our thoughts and ideas out there for all the other people who are just as fucking weird. And it hasn't been in these last 10 years that would have been possible.
Yeah, and I think that you guys had so much great things to say about the last decade and being nerdy. And I think that for me, I agree with everything that you guys said. I think really in the end, my biggest takeaway from the last decade is what Brooklyn's saying in chat right now, and that's that nerd is cool, and we made it happen. And it's awesome to think about that we get to be the cool guys. Out of nowhere, we get to be the cool guys, and I really dig that. And I think that as much as I loved the last decade in nerd stuff, I think it's only going to go up from here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're in the Blade Runner future now, man. Like, Blade Runner has happened in the last decade.
We have cars driving themselves.
Two things. We've had Back to the Future and Blade Runner happen in these 10 years.
Okay.
In one of the many versions.
There are human beings who get into their car every day, this year, today, where their car drives them to work, and then it drives them home without them touching any of the controls.
Crazy.
The fact that they bring their car to them,
right.
Honestly,
like the car shows up and then you just get in and the car does what it's supposed to do.
You know what? This last decade was great.
It's amazing.
But I'm going to say cheers to the last decade, and here's the next one, guys.
Indeed.
Seriously, because it's going to get crazy from here.
Yeah.
All right, that is everything we have for the show this week. This was our big decade blowout show. We hope you enjoyed it. We know we ran long. We hope it was fun. Over our break, which we'll be taking until January 6th, will be our next live stream. You can always reach out to us on various social media platforms to just talk to us about what your thoughts on the decade were. Tony, where can they do that?
Facebook.com/Nerd, like, share with your friends. Twitch.tv/Nerd live Mondays, 7:30 Central-ish. Again, we're coming back January 6th. I almost said December 6th. And that would be in the past.
That is the past.
So a whole new decade ahead of us. You can reach us out on Twitter, which is @TheSillyNerd. I'm still surprised that's still around.
Hey, talk to me all the time on there.
I'm really surprised it hasn't been shut down for many reasons.
What's Twitter?
Exactly. Email address is info@thesilliernerd.com. That's the one that we're still confused on. How is email still a thing? So yeah, if you want to donate on the show, donate on thesilliernerd.com, where you can read some articles and stuff. We're working on changes to that kind of thing. We're working on changes to everything at this point. Like we have a new year ahead of us. We have a new 10 years. We've got a new everything. We've got hopefully a new renewed interest in talking about the nerdy shit that we're interested in for you every week. And hope you stick around with us for the ride. This has been a long fucking episode.
Yeah.
So I'm just making it longer.
All right.
Also, the beginning of 2020 is going to be fucking crazy. So just buckle up.
So until next decade, for Tony, this is James.
For James, this is Tony.
And I'm Hector.
Adventures, good night.
And good game.
Thanks for sticking with us, everybody. I've got to pee so bad.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm right there behind you.
Just literally behind me.
I'm going to pee between your legs.
If you want to see the Christmas tree, you can go to the bathroom upstairs. Literally, it's up the stairs, exactly where that bathroom's at. Yeah, all right, I'm going to sign us out. Thank you all very much for sticking around.
Thanks, guys.
No, it's been amazing. This is
I'm going to go look at a tree.
This has been great.
And not pee on it.
I'm going to go turn the lights on for the tree so he can have that. All right. Bye, guys.